Alright, so how are we going to start this off, and what the fuck is this show called?
It doesn't have a name yet. We're just going to talk.
Two Matts, one Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Well, let's see what the date is. This is December
It's New
31st.
Year's Eve, Matt.
December 31st, 2021, New Year's Eve. Officially, I guess, the first recording of whatever we end up calling this YouTube channel video. So anybody listening to this is going to be listening to 6 months in the past, I guess. So this will not be prominent in the cultural zeitgeist by the time you're listening to it. But hey, we figured let's just throw caution to the wind and try to do something tonight and see what happens. Because if we don't make ourselves make content, we will not get this thing off the ground. So what better way to start than talking about the biggest movie of the year. It's made $1.5 billion, I think, by now, and that is Spider-Man No Way Home. So we're going to discuss that film tonight, and we're going to, everybody loves lists, so we're going to just sort of rank all the Spider-Man films, the MCU films, the Sony films. I think there's, 8 total? 8 or 9. We're going to rank all those, and then, have a general discussion amongst friends. Does that sound good, fellas?
I mean, this is sounding like a 4 out of 10 opening so far. But...
It really is. It really is. Now, I'll also tell the audience that we are actually playing Prominence Poker on PlayStation as we record this. So at random points in time, if someone has a royal flush and throws out, we'll probably break in and have some sort of exclamation as to what's going on. So keep that in mind. But other than that, we're going to talk Spider-Man tonight. So I will sort of throw it to you guys first. We don't need to get right into No Way Home, but let me gauge your guys' interest in Spider-Man as a character. Now, obviously, I am a huge Spider-Man fan. Everyone knows that. Spider-Man was my favorite hero growing up. I literally reorganized my whole comic collection when I moved, and I have 2 long boxes just filled with Spider-Man comics. I just adore pretty much everything Spider-Man, so I'm already the total Spider-Man fanboy here. But I'm not really sure what your levels of engagement with Spider-Man as a character are. Ronan, we'll start with you. Tell us about your love or not love for Spider-Man. Where are you on that sort of spectrum of interest in Spider-Man as a character?
Oh, he's just the worst. Just the worst possible thing ever. No. The Spider-Man, it's more or less like a lot of these kind of Marvel characters now. There are so many ways to absorb them that just calling them comic characters kind of cuts them short. Like, my original introduction with Spider-Man, I knew who he was, cultural zeitgeist as a kid. But it was that 90s TV show with that bitchin' theme song.
Oh yeah, the Fox cartoon.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one that really kind of gets your interest going, and at least for me, got me going into the storylines, because I remember watching Spider-Man 3, going, well, wait a minute, that's not how it happened in the TV show, because I thought the TV show was how it happened. Little did I know that the symbiote was actually came from the Secret Wars arc, but. I very much enjoy Spider-Man. Comic-wise, I have a shoebox that's full of random comics, but they're mostly Deadpool comics. I do have some of those, whatever you would call it when you get those softback things where it's 5 or 6 comics all put up into one. I have a couple of Spider-Man Ultimates in that. So, the Spider-Man is very much a good, fun pop culture character because there are so many ways to absorb it and to like it, especially video game wise.
I actually think that's a really good point because I was introduced to Spider-Man through the comic books, and you're saying you were introduced to Spider-Man through the Fox cartoon show in the 90s. So I do think that's a very interesting point, and it kind of reminds me a lot of Star Wars fans too. A lot of the original Star Wars fans who saw, A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but then people like my sister who really started loving Star Wars, or even my fiance when seeing the prequels and stuff, they really liked that stuff. And then people who saw the Clone Wars cartoon, and I really liked that, and that's what got me into Star Wars. So I think the gateway into some of these pop culture media things is interesting. So yeah, okay, very cool. Steve, before I go to you, Steve, so Ronan, with regard to Spider-Man as a character, where does he rank on your tier of well, for lack of a better term, we'll call them superheroes that you're interested in. Like, who is your favorite superhero, and where does Spider-Man sort of fall? Are you kind of casually interested in him as a character, or are you like hardcore into it? Like, where does he lie?
It's a kind of a mild with the internet being the way it is, and YouTube, and there are whole channels that are just dedicated to, like, 2-hour video explaining, like, explaining the such and such arc in the comic books. So, yeah, so like the brand new day arc or whatever in the comic book. So I can keep up with certain comic book arcs via YouTube that way. So I would say he'd be pretty high up there in terms of like favorite characters. There was a point where I would have said Deadpool, but this is where I sound kind of snobby. I was actually a Deadpool comic fan long before the internet got a hold of him and turned him into an annoying meme. But I would have put Deadpool above that. But I'll say Spider-Man's up there at the top.
Okay. I hate Deadpool. Just as an aside, I've always hated that character. But but we're not talking Deadpool tonight. Steve, tell us a little bit about how did you first come to know of Spider-Man? What was your sort of entry gateway drug, so to speak? And where does he sort of fall on your list of characters you're interested in?
Same as Ronan. No one in my family had comic book money growing up, so my first exposure was...
They were like 50 cents in the 80s. Come on now.
Yeah, I stand by what I said.
You don't know what
my first exposure was the 90s cartoons. The X-Men cartoon and the Spider-Man cartoon are what got me into comics. I love that, unfortunately, has died at this point, but I still enjoy the movies and cartoons and media that is not comic books. X-Men has always been my favorite as far as Marvel stuff goes. Spider-Man is probably like the tier below X-Men.
Okay, so in general, we're all big fans of the character. I think you can say just generally.
Definitely,
we're definitely interested in the stories, and hey, if a new Spider-Man movie comes out, we're interested. We're definitely going to go check it out and see it. So,
yeah.
Now that we sort of know the baseline of where we're all coming from, let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about No Way Home. No Way Home, of course, is the third of the sort of quote-unquote home trilogy that the MCU has actually put out. So what was it? It was Homecoming, Far From Home, and now No Way Home. I'm going to do this just because I think it's going to be fun radio. Ronan, why don't you... And spoilers, by the way. Obviously, 6 months in the future. if you haven't seen this movie at this point in time, that's a you problem. But Ronan, just because I think this is going to be fun, why don't you try to explain to the listener out there that's listening to this, what is No Way Home? What's it all about? Give us the high-level synopsis of this movie.
No Way Home is a very soft attempt of Marvel to take elements from the comic, forget the comic book arc where a Spider-Man that tries to make everyone forget his identity because he reveals it at one point in the comics.
One More Day and Brand New Day. That's
terrible stories, by the way.
So that's them acclimating that element of it. Is Parker getting outed somehow via his identity, and the whole movie is basically about him trying to regain some form of normalcy while fucking up the multiverse in the process.
The end.
There.
Great.
Yeah. I did
Good
it.
job.
Yeah.
That went better. That went better than I thought.
Let's get to like more detail. Like, so Spider-Man at the end of Far From Home has his identity outed by Mysterio, who then frames him for murder and the attack on wherever the hell Far From Home took place at. And so his life is essentially ruined, as well as the life of all of his closest friends and allies. He goes to Doctor Strange and says, make people forget. Doctor Strange tries that, but Peter Parker, being Peter Parker, completely screws up his spell, and rather than making people forget that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, it begins drawing in people that know that secret, which basically means the majority of the bad guys from the Raimi series and the Amazing series show up in the MCU.
Yeah,
but only one Goblin.
Well, it's
There,
interesting
there
to me.
was only one goblin. What are you talking about?
I thought no, it's like there was a James Franco
No,
goblin that
he's been
No,
canceled. He can't
no.
be in.
that was exactly it. He got canceled. You fuck around with little kids.
I don't know
that
what you're
always
talking
happens.
about. There were no other goblins besides the original Green Goblin.
Now, when we talk about our ranking list, I like a long time ago, we used to have a podcast, and we actually did an episode. I'm not going to even name the podcast because it doesn't even fun. But we did a podcast on Spider-Man 3 when it came out, and I distinctly remember that I was the only one, I think, that was actually defending that movie. And I'm like, this is not as bad as everybody's making it out to be. And interestingly enough, before No Way Home came out, I rewatched all of the Spider-Man movies, all the way through, all the Raimi ones, all the Webb ones, all the MCU ones, because I wanted to be 100% prepared for whatever No Way Home was going to throw at me. And I remember telling this to Rachel. I was like, I don't really care how they get to showing me the things that I want my eyeballs to see. I just want them to actually do it, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about like potential plot holes and things that don't quite make sense in this, but I was wondering, I was like, were all of these characters actually in the MCU? We just didn't get to see them. I don't know. I don't know if just a few people came through with Doctor Strange's spell that screwed up, or if a ton of characters came through. Like maybe Mary Jane was there, but she was, I don't know, working at a diner or something and was wandering around trying to figure out where Peter was, or like what's happening, and we just didn't see that in the short amount of time that the movie takes place. I don't know if they'll ever describe that or explain it or not, but I thought that was an interesting component. Anyway, continue.
No, we're done.
All right,
Clearly, we're done. We had nothing to talk about.
You forgot how you segued us into that. You wanted to talk about Spider-Man 3, then you got sidetracked.
Yeah,
I know.
you were setting us up for something that never came.
It's my ADHD. I have ADHD, and my brain goes all over the place. So forgive me that. But okay, so let me just sort of state my feelings of No Way Home. I love this movie. Unsurprisingly, I absolutely love this movie. And the reason why I love this movie was because I felt like this was complete joy at the movie theaters, right? And there's this thing that goes around the internet where people bitch and complain about quote unquote fan service. The movie's just throwing fan service at me. And I don't think fan service is a bad thing in and of itself if it serves a story and it works for the story. And I felt like all of the stuff in this completely worked for the story that they were trying to tell. But the thing about this is in the old days, in the 30s and 40s, people who know the history of Hollywood, there's the old adage of give the people what they want, right? You make the movie that the people want to see. And this movie, the entire world, well, I would say 99% of the world, wanted to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield team up with Tom Holland and have a sort of fun adventure fighting a bunch of villains. And that's exactly what this movie delivered, right? So people they complain all the time, well, Hollywood doesn't listen, and Hollywood does this, and they do that. And it's like, this is a case of the MCU gave you exactly what you wanted. And to me, it was just completely joyous. I had a smile on my face the entire time I was at the theater, underneath my mask, of course, so no one could see it. But I'm just like, I left that theater, I'm like, I am happy. This movie made me incredibly happy. And ultimately, that's what the movie should do, right? You could watch, I would say 75% of all of the Marvel cinematic movies that are out there kind of suck. They're all
very formulaic.
Yeah, they're all baseline, quote unquote, good on a baseline level, but they're kind of like one and dones. Like you watch them once, like okay, that was fine, but I'm not gonna go back and rewatch anything like that. This is a movie that I could go back and rewatch 100 times. It's not just because I like Spider-Man so much, but I was just like, this was just such a fun, exciting film. Now there are a few things. I'm sort of cursed with, I like to consider myself a creative individual. Steve and I have made movies in the past and things like that. So we're always thinking like, oh wow, what if they would have done this, or could they have done this a little bit better and stuff. There are certain things in this movie that I will say, a couple things that I was like, they dropped the ball on it. The first was the introduction of Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. Now,
He just kind of walks up.
well, that was my problem. So I had no problem with how they introduced Andrew Garfield. I thought that was cool, and I was like, okay, it's like when Ned opens up the portal and you can see the tall, lanky actor. It's like, okay, that's not Tom Holland. That's too tall for Tom Holland. Okay, it's clearly Andrew Garfield. So you knew it was coming, and I love that. I love that whole sequence. But then the characters just do the exact same thing, but with Tobey Maguire. And I was like, wouldn't it have been way cooler if Tobey Maguire is introduced like an action sequence, like maybe Tom Holland's getting his ass kicked or something, and then boom, out of the blue, it's Tobey Maguire that shows up to save the day, so to speak, and that's how he got introduced. So I didn't like that they did the exact same introduction for both characters. And the other thing
just real quick, I wanted to bump in there. The good thing about the way they introduced Tom Holland is he's not wearing
You mean Toby?
Toby, yeah. They did a good thing with him. He wasn't just in the Spider-Man suit, and he didn't just whip his mask off instantly. And he even threw a little comment out there about, like, well, yeah, that's it's kind of the whole point of a secret identity, because all the other characters are so fucking quick to whip that goddamn mask off. But he was like, no, yeah, that's kind of the point of a secret identity. So I enjoyed that. He knew what was up with that.
Oh, sure. I thought he was great.
Going back to Matt's idea about, how do we know that Mary Jane and whoever didn't also get pulled into the MCU universe, why did they stop at 2 Peter Parkers? Like, why didn't Ned, throw the ring out there a third time to just see how many Spider-Men they could reel in?
They pull into the animated one from the 90s cartoon, and Ronan just freaks the fuck out. Obviously, because,
we know the real world reason why, but in universe they're just like, oh, I guess we got enough.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that have been cool at the very end where Ned's like, screw this, we need more help, and just keeps bringing in Spider-Man from all these other things. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio was originally going to be James Cameron's Spider-Man for the movie that never made. Wouldn't it be amazing if Ned swings his finger open and it's like Leonardo DiCaprio swings through or some shit like that?
They ain't got that kind of money.
Yeah, they don't get that kind of money. But yeah, I liked all that. I loved the way Tobey Maguire played it. Now, Andrew Garfield, the interesting thing about Andrew Garfield is I rewatched Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2. Those movies suck, right? I'm a diehard Spider-Man fan. I hate those movies. And one of the main reasons why I hate those movies is because Andrew Garfield, I feel, was terrible as Peter Parker. Just absolutely terrible. And the reason why
he's too hip and cool.
He's too GQ. He's too cool. He's got this cool factor to him. He doesn't feel at all like he's getting bullied and beat up or anything like that, or that, he doesn't have any friends or anything like that. He just seems like, yeah, if that guy was going to my high school, he'd be like the coolest dude, and, every girl would want him, sort of thing. So he did not feel like Peter Parker to me. That being said, after I watched No Way Home, what I realized is I thought he was awesome as an adult Peter Parker. But as a teenager in ASM and ASM2, he didn't work at all. So I thought he was fantastic in this movie. But sorry, again, my ADHD, I get sidetracked. The other thing that I thought I would have loved to have seen is in that moment before the big fight at the very end, when all three of them are there and they're sort of talking to each other. That's one of the greatest things I liked about this movie, is just like those quiet moments when they're just interacting and they start talking about the villains that they've fought. They only talk about the villains we've seen in the movies. I would have loved for them, like Tobey Maguire, to name drop some Cardiac or some obscure thing in
Sticks and Stone.
Because it would have been so awesome to be like, wait a minute, I want to see that movie.
His adventures just continued. More supervillains appeared.
Yeah, I just would have loved to have little callbacks and shout outs to villains we've never seen, because as a fan you play that stuff out in your mind. You're like, oh man, what if we would have gotten to see Spider-Man fight this character, or this character would have been great. Thought it was a missed opportunity. If I was able to look over the script beforehand, I would have been like, hey, put some different characters in there just to throw a bone out to the fans. They'll freak out and they'll love it.
But you could have done that with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, because you have Sam Raimi working on the fucking Doctor Strange movie. Just ask him real quick. Hey, if you were to make a Spider-Man 4 and 5, who would you have him fight? And to just
No. Here's the thing, Ronan. What you do is you have either Andrew Garfield. No, you have Tobey Maguire, because it would make sense under Tobey Maguire. You have Tom Holland ask Tobey Maguire about villains he's faced, and Tobey Maguire mentions Mysterio, but it's the Bruce Campbell version that we were supposed to get with the Sam Raimi films, like Bruce Campbell as Mysterio, and they have a little thing there that would have made people go nuts. Absolutely go nuts. But overall, those are just very sort of minor gripes that I have. It's one of those things where I'm cursed with. I thought of, like, I feel, maybe other people listening don't think it's as cool, but things that I thought would be cooler that they could have done. I mean, if you're gonna do a movie like this and you're gonna want to give the people sort of all of this stuff, like, here, it's what you want. Go all the way, right? Just go overboard with it, in my opinion. If you're already going there, you might as well just push it over the edge. But overall, I love this movie. I will, once we get to our rankings, I'll let you know where I rank it. But I can't wait to watch it again. But yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Ronan, your thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home?
More slobbing of this movie. Yeah, it was. We're just gonna have another Spider-Man love fest. It was a great movie, great time. I saw it with a theater that was very. It was hard to find a theater that had tickets for sale for it, because all the pre-orders and everything. So, I just decided I was going to try and see it early, because there were a lot of it got spoiled on YouTube. Like the multiple Spider-Mans, some asshole put that on YouTube, and I saw it as I was doom scrolling. So I was like, "Fuck! I need to just go see this movie so nothing else gets spoiled." But I found the theater, and it was still pretty packed, and the audience reaction was awesome. It's one of those kind of everyone talks about how shitty theaters are, but when you get a theater that's got like a good a good crowd where all the moments that pop,
Yep.
Then it could be like, all the moments that popped. Like a lot of the people in that theater apparently did not know about the multiple Spider-Men, because they marked out like schoolgirls when Andrew Garfield takes off that mask, and said, "Oh my God!" People start clapping like, "No way!" But they clap when Matthew Murdock showed up, which that's another thing.
I love that you call him Matthew Murdock. That's awesome. Matthew Murdock.
Daredevil randomly shows up, and it's Charlie Cox from the Netflix show, and then he catches a brick, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm a really good lawyer."
And that was great. That was great. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, some people, like a cynic, would say, "Oh, well, that's just fan service, right?" But it makes people happy. Like, isn't the job of the movie to put a smile on someone's face? So when people follow, like, Charlie Cox and Daredevil, and like, man, this guy was great as Daredevil, just absolutely awesome as Daredevil.
He was.
We would love to see him, like, in the MCU, and then boom, they give you that moment, and it's not just him as the lawyer. He literally catches that brick, and you could just see that, like, Tom Holland is like, how the hell did you do that? Like, oh, I'm just a really good lawyer, and then boom, he's gone. You don't even see him again.
Yeah, but at this point in the MCU, that's really all you need for some of these characters. They just need to pop up and go away. 'Cause that's how it is in the comics. Oftentimes, somebody just kind of pops in for an issue, says something, and then
it's true. Guest stars.
Goes and pimps away.
Yep.
They don't need to stick. They don't need to stick around for too long now. But those were good moments too. The big spoilery thing that, like, at least I was glad that I didn't see get spoiled was when Aunt May bites it, and like Goblin's glider hits her, and then she stands up, and I'm just like, there's no fucking way. And then she tells him, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm like, oh shit, she's gonna die. She ain't making it.
With great power, there must also come great responsibility. If you notice, she actually said the actual line that was in the original comic, Amazing Fantasy number 15. Yeah,
close enough.
But it's little things like that for, like, diehard, like, fans. You're like, oh, like, they were paying attention. They did it, and so that's part of the joy of this movie. You're like, oh, fine, they finally did these little things that even the other Spider-Man films sort of missed.
For me, like I would, because you talked about like all the the great like the Spider-Man. I'm gonna put my focus on the villains because this is the villains that appeared in it: Green Goblin, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, Jamie Foxx. This is the best that they got. This is the best they've been. Like especially like the Mark Webb ones, like Jamie Foxx has Electro. This is them as they should have always been. It's like all the villains are done great in this movie, and they all get moments to shine. Like William Dafoe's being super creepy as the Green Goblin. You're just waiting for it the whole time.
Willem.
Hey,
it's not Lance Hendrickson.
eat my asshole.
William Hendricks. There we go. Go ahead. Sorry, Ron. Continue.
Defoe gets to be super creepy, which is what he's good at.
Oh, yeah.
Gets to do that smile. I'm, of course, a Dr. Octopus mark. Like Alfred Molina was my favorite villain, and he still is, I suppose. He's the best of all the Spider-Man villains, at least from my eyes. And they're all at peak. They're all at peak performance in this movie. And I never saw Amazing Spider-Man 2, so I remember asking you. It's like but what I had seen of it, like Jamie Foxx, like Electro, I think he's playing him differently. Like, yeah, he's a completely different character in this movie.
Yeah. Now, Electro is my favorite villain of all time in comic books. Steve knows this. So, not only is Spider-Man my favorite character, but Electro is my favorite villain. And in Amazing Spider-Man 2, I mean, you have no idea how crushed my heart was when I watched that, because they just did Electro dirty in that movie, and I was so stoked for it. I remember they released a clip of the movie before it actually was released. I think I posted it on our website or something, and it was like this slow motion sequence when like Electro's shooting out electricity everywhere, and like the slow motion as Spider-Man's like flinging around protecting all these citizens, whatever. Like, this is going to be amazing. And then I watched the movie and I wanted to cry. I was like, what did they do? Now, I will say that Jamie Foxx's Electro in this is light years better than what it was in Amazing Spider-Man 2. I will still say that of all of the villains in this film, because I would say he's like third, right? It's like Willem Dafoe is number one as Green Goblin, then Doc Ock as, when he's a bad guy, I guess, because he, spoiler, he turns good in this. And then Electro is kind of right under that, because Sandman and Lizard, I don't think they needed to be in this movie, honestly. Like, I really don't think they needed to be.
Lizard's just there because that was the only bad guy from the first one. And Sandman is there because James Franco got canceled, and everybody seems to universally hate the Spider-Man 3 version of Venom.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much.
Yeah, there was no way you were going to get Topher Grace. Topher, what is this fuck in this? There was no way that was going to happen.
I would have loved to have seen that, though. I would have loved to have seen that. Not as a major character, but something. Go ahead, Steve. Yeah. Go.
I loved this movie, but I think when we're talking about, what if and what could have been, why could they have not just made up a reason to have, like, a sixth bad guy and have, like, a multiversal, like, Sinister Six?
That's the big thing, right?
It's like Mysterio be alive. He fakes his death, and because I was really hoping he was going to show up because Mysterio was great in the last movie.
Love Mysterio. Jake Gyllenhaal was fantastic as Mysterio as well. And again, it's one of those things where, remember the context of this, though. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, what was the main criticism of it? Had too many villains. It sucked. What was the main criticism of Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Mark Webb? Too many villains. It sucked. So,
also
I mean,
writing.
Yeah, but now they have this movie had even more villains than the Raimi and Webb versions, and maybe they're like, can we fit in 6? We can barely fit in 5.
This one works because they didn't have to, like, create origin stories for everyone. Like, everyone came in. This is like the villain team up, like the villain Avengers.
Yeah.
Like, they could have made more work because the groundwork was laid elsewhere.
It's the reason why the Justice League sucked. Justice League sucked because because you had to shove in the origin story for like 4 heroes who didn't get their origin stories. They just wanted to jump to an Avengers type movie. So like, it's not the amount of villains / heroes, it's the way it's written. And like Steve just said, this movie had the benefit of having, like, 20 some odd years worth of backstory that they didn't have to explain because it's already in the audience going mind.
Yeah.
We already know who Alfred Molina's been, not Venom, Doc Ock is. We already know who Green Goblin is. Maybe not everybody knows who Jamie Foxx's Electro was, because again, I haven't seen that movie.
Oh, but yeah, no, I mean, you make a good point, but they might have been a little gun shy. They might have been like 5 is pushing, and you never know. They might be setting up. I mean, the rumors out right now are that Andrew Garfield is coming back for Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, Sony is going to continue making Spider-Man movies with Andrew Garfield and possibly Tobey Maguire. And you could have a Sinister Six over there. I mean, because the way this one ends, I don't think you're going to have a Sinister Six in the MCU anytime soon.
Most likely not.
They keep killing off the villains. They need to stop. And why wasn't Vulture here? People forget about Vulture.
Yeah.
Vulture is in jail. I mean, sure, he could have gotten out, but
he's had
his story's kind of over.
He's had no. The end of Homecoming sets up it deliberately sets up a Scorpion and Vulture having some form of future presence in other movies.
Yeah,
just been
Scorpion is definitely
erased.
set up. Scorpion's definitely set up.
It's just been erased, but apparently Michael Keaton's Vulture is going to be popping up in that Morbius movie. That poor Michael Keaton.
That looks bad. That looks so bad.
Anyway, it is because I saw that god awful looking trailer. Is the Michael Keaton from the Morbius trailer supposed to be the Vulture from the MCU?
Nobody knows. Everyone's like, cause obviously it's one of those things where you're gonna have to watch the movie to find out. But they intentionally put him in the Morbius trailer because it's like they're being transferred from prisons or something, and Michael Keaton's a prisoner, and like Jared Leto is walking by, and they're like two convicts talking to each other or something like that, and everyone's like, well, wait a minute, with all the multiverse stuff, is this a multiversal version of the Vulture that's in the Sony verse now?
Sony, please sell Spider-Man back to Disney, and then you go do your own thing.
This movie just made $1.5 billion. There's no way they're going to do that. But Steve, give us your sort of thoughts on No Way Home. Your experience seeing it at the theater. Now, you didn't see it opening weekend, right?
I saw it 2 days ago as of this recording, which was
the theater
2
still
weeks after it came out.
Busy, or was it? Did you have
it was about half full, but
okay.
I saw it at noon on a weekday.
Okay, so give us your overall thoughts.
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Talking about fan service, I'm like you. I am completely fine with fan service. I'm completely fine with giving people what they want and having tons of Easter eggs and callbacks. Like, my only caveat is it's got to make sense. I have this thing where if I have to choose between something really, really cool happening and that thing not making sense, I will choose to just skip it. I would rather have a more boring version of a story if the boring thing makes more sense and sticks to the logic and the rules of the world that I'm watching right now. And to my great delight, the other characters, the other Spider-Man showing up, the bad guys showing up, it's all explained. It's magic, but still, there is a built-in explanation for how all this works. So I had no problem with any of the fan service. And I know after the movie, I texted you and Ronan, and I was both like, well, I loved it, but it didn't make a lick of sense. And then you were both kind of like, why didn't it make sense? And it made me re-examine it, and I realized that it actually did make sense. They covered all their bases, and what was throwing me off was a bunch of unanswered questions. It's the same logic questions that come with multiple universes and time travel that no movie ever wants to answer because you can't answer it because how could you possibly know? But the things that I didn't like were, okay, so all of the bad guys have been saved and redeemed by the rules of the multiverse established in, Loki. You can't change your own timeline, so Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are going back to the original timelines where everyone is still dead anyway. So maybe the knowledge that they helped these people out there somewhere in the multiverse, is good for them.
It gives them some closure. I'm okay with that because it means that their actions still had consequences. So like their actions weren't just magically undone. There's still consequences for what they did. But it also means, like, Alfred Molina, Defoe and all, they'll go back to a timeline. So I'm assuming that Alfred Molina is going to go back to the timeline where he's in the water and Spider-Man is punching him. And then he's going to be like, Peter, no, dear boy, stop punching me.
Wait, stop. I'm good now.
But that's not the Peter that was in No Way Home.
Exactly.
Like, that would be a new Peter. So I guess what I'm getting at is I would have liked some sort of epilogue, some sort of confirmation. The two alternate Peters, Tobey and Andrew Garfield, are they going back to their original timeline where everyone is dead, all the bad guys are dead, none of them ever reformed except for Sandman, who reformed, then unreformed, then re-reformed, I guess.
Yeah, the Sandman thing was like, wait a minute.
Sandman is probably the weakest part of this movie. But anyway,
and the lizard,
I would love to think that these two former Spider-Men are now going to some sort of new happy timeline where all the bad guys are saved, everyone lived, but by the rules of Loki, that's not what's going to happen.
So Jeff posted here in the chat. So even though they've been rehabilitated, they return right in time to die. So how I understood Loki, and I could be wrong, obviously we are trying to debate and talk. I don't even think the Marvel really knows exactly. I mean, I think they're trying to be like, here's a gray area, this kind of is what works, but
it's up to your interpretation.
Yeah, when I watched Loki, what I got is at the end of Loki, there is no more prime sort of timeline or anything, right? There's all these different sort of now multiverses breaking off in every single direction. So in my head, when Willem Dafoe goes back to his original timeline or whatever, there's now going to be two branch timelines. There's going to be a timeline where Willem Dafoe is dead and that Tobey Maguire he's killed himself with his own goblin flyer. But at that same point, there's going to be another branching timeline where that didn't happen. So now there's two Tobey Maguires in a sense, where two separate things happened.
That's my understanding as well. But since the two Spider-Men come from the furthest points of their timeline, and again, according to Endgame, you can't change your own timeline, they're getting sent back to the bad timeline.
Right. And that's what would happen. But there would be another version of Tobey Maguire who was able to redeem Willem Dafoe. And he's now living. He's done his whole Spider-Man, time as, hey, I've still had to fight a lot of bad guys, but at least I didn't have to deal with the repercussions of my best friend trying to kill me and blah 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 blah. Whereas the Tobey in this movie still dealt with that.
Somewhere out there now in the Marvel multiverse, there's a timeline where Spider-Man 3 didn't happen. And that is the best timeline.
Somewhere out there, man, I wonder. So there's a timeline where Green Goblin goes back and he's cured, he's been fixed. But that would technically be the earliest point in the timeline. But he also would know about what he would also have this knowledge of. Dr. Otto Octavius, he's making the sun thing. Well, I've already seen how this works out, so he could intervene, stop that. So the Doc Ock thing would never happen in his timeline.
Well, these are the things that I want to be shown, rather than us having to talk about them.
You want a lot more movies showing you exactly what happened. And also, I think in the movie, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the movie they mentioned that the villains were pulled from the moment which they realized that Spider-Man was Peter Parker, right? So in my head, Willem Dafoe was not pulled from the exact point of his death in that original Raimi timeline. He was pulled from the point where he realizes at their little Thanksgiving or whatever they're having, when Peter was cut, and he realizes, oh shit, I've been fighting Peter the whole time, and that's when he leaves. So I think he was pulled from then. Doc Ock would be pulled from the point when Tobey Maguire pulled his mask off and revealed himself before he actually went down into the into the water to die.
Yeah, I think Doc Ock might still be dying in this new timeline.
He could be. He could be.
But he might die happier.
Yeah.
Or maybe because in
Doc
Spider-Man
Ock
2...
Doc Ock mentions that he should have killed I should have killed your little girlfriend at this time. So this is happening in the Doc fight, is when Doc Ock is
like at
through.
the end of Spider-Man 2, Peter Parker unmasks and Doc Ock recognizes them, and it's brilliant but lazy. But then like the tentacles kind of take over and go to choke him again, and I think that's the moment that Doc Ock was pulled from.
Yeah,
it could have been. Yeah, it could have been. But regardless, there's a quote-unquote explanation for it all. Whether or not you buy into it, that's up to the individual person. Personally, I feel like, I'm going to buy into this because it's a goddamn superhero movie. I mean, there are people flying around and doing shit.
I can't do it. I need things to make sense.
That's why you stopped watching The Flash, correct?
I can only shut my brain off when the movie isn't taking itself all that seriously. I've mentioned this before. Dark Knight Rises. Batman's back gets fixed with a fucking rock. Those movies take themselves very seriously, so that's horseshit within the realms of that movie. The MCU movies are a little bit more fun and loose, but they still kind of take their rules seriously.
So how do you guys feel about the end of the movie? Right. So the end of the movie, basically, what happens is Doctor Strange can't prevent all of these people from coming through to invading, I guess, the MCU, because they're all being pulled to the MCU in particular, and so Peter Parker basically is like, all right, then just change the spell so no one remembers me whatsoever, and then obviously they're not going to be drawn to him because no one remembers, and saves the multiverse or whatever they're doing there. Ronan, how did you feel about the end? Were you satisfied with how this all played out? Did it make sense to you? What are your thoughts?
It makes sense to me. He has they might not remember him, like Ned and MJ. They don't remember him, but he has all these. He could reintroduce himself as kind of sit next to Ned at the bar or whatever, just kind of have a talk with him, and then become friends with him as far as Ned is concerned for the first time. But it's like I don't understand why he seems like he's cut off. All he has to do is just reintroduce himself to these people. He's got all this knowledge.
Well, at the end he tries to do that, and I think he kind of realizes that even though I promised them that I'll find them, they're honestly probably better off without me.
Because he sees the bandage on MJ's head, and he's like, oh my god, I'm going to bring... And then, of course, then both of them had gotten into college at that point in time, and he's probably like... I mean, the rest of the world, or at least half of the world at least, still thinks Spider-Man's a murderer. Right? Because a lot of people just assume that Spider-Man, murdered Mysterio. So that's probably still floating around out there.
I'm okay with that kind of stuff, because that, my understanding, my knowledge of the comics is that is a thing within Spider-Man's world. Like in the comics, is that some people don't like him because of Daily Bugle type shit, while others know that he's the neighborhood hero. He helped my sister when she was getting mugged. Yeah, so I'm okay with people being iffy on the fence on whether or not he's good or not. That's
No Way Home basically turned MCU Spider-Man into comic Spider-Man, and it worked. I like that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and hopefully now he will fucking protect his identity instead of take his mask off and show it to every person he sees.
You pay those actors millions of dollars, Ronan, and they want their face on screen. I mean, come on. It was great, when Willem Dafoe basically smashed the Green Goblin. It was like, we're going to get Willem Dafoe acting crazy, and that's a good thing. That is a beautiful thing, because I thought he was fantastic.
I'm just saying, if Carl Urban was going to swallow his pride and never take off the mask when he was playing Dredd in Dredd 3D, these people can do the right thing and do what's right for the character and not constantly unmask themselves. You'll get all your character time.
That's good. Now, I will say that the ending, as I think even Jeff had sort of mentioned, he was unsure of how Doctor Strange Strange's spell actually worked, right? Like, everyone has forgotten about Peter Parker, and yet there's still going to be all this shit out there, right? There's going to be YouTube videos. J. Jonah Jameson
what I was
mentioned.
wondering.
So
Like,
this is
how
how
does
I
the spell work?
This is how I rationalize it, right? So imagine your grandma and your grandpa both have Alzheimer's, right? And you go to them and you're showing them pictures of them with you, and like, hey, grandma, grandpa, we had all these great times together. Remember, we went and had dinner with each other like last night and blah blah. But they don't remember at all. They don't remember who you are. People with dementia all the time, their family members, they don't remember their own family members. It doesn't mean that the experiences that you've had throughout your whole life, or all the material objects to prove you are who you are, cease to exist or are deleted from the thing. It just means that everybody, like, they forgot. Now, just imagine that with everybody. If every single person on Earth had collective Alzheimer's about you, Steve, it doesn't matter if you're like, hey man, don't you remember we were on this podcast talking about Spider-Man? We're like, who are you? Like, I don't remember this at all. Like, I just don't remember you. So to me, that's kind of how it is. Like, the entire world has, and maybe this is not what the writers intended. I mean, I don't know. I didn't write the thing, but I just kind of think nobody remembers you because literally they have no thoughts of you. They might see something and be like your grandma with dementia. I look at this photo of us at Disneyland together, and she's like, who are you? Like, I don't know who you are. That sort of thing. So that's how I sort of, think of it, whether it's right or wrong.
I was trying to figure that out too. Like, Doctor Strange at the end says it'll be like you never existed. Well, did the spell erase memories, or did it erase evidence, or both?
Like, I think it's just memories, personally.
Peter Parker, presumably still went to school, so there are probably school records out there. And,
yeah, but nobody would remember. Nobody would remember.
Think what you're saying is the best way to rationalize it, but again, like I would rather some sort of evidence be in the actual film instead of us having to figure it out for us.
And you might see that in the next film, because MJ is still wearing the necklace that he gave her in Far From Home. So she's wearing that necklace. She's at somewhere. She probably knows, like that YouTuber that I was watching was trying to explain this stuff. It's like she knows she received it, and she knows it's important to her, but she can't remember who gave it to her or why it was given to her, because, if Spider-Man had given it to her, she'd be able to remember, oh yeah, Spider-Man gave me this necklace, but she has no recollection of Peter Parker. And so it's just kind of like muddled, right? You're like,
how's your chip count looking there, Matt?
It's looking a little light. I'm a little light in the stack. All right. But yeah, that's how I rationalize it, and I'm fine with that.
That works.
And I'm sure in the next movie they're going to delve further into, hey, this is what happened, so to speak.
We are getting more movies, because they've already announced that they're working on sequels to it. Like the worries that we had, like, oh god, Tom Holland's gone, there's not going to be any more Spider-Man, Sony's taking it back. All of that stuff does seem to not be accurate, because they are going to be making more of them.
Sony has their Spider-Man now. They got Andrew Garfield. They can continue making their Spider-Man movies, and they can continue sharing Tom Holland with the MCU, and continuing to rake in double money, essentially. But Jeff made an interesting comment here. He says, so Doctor Strange gave everyone on planet Earth dementia? What a hero. I will say that I think Doctor Strange was written very poorly in this movie. Like, if there was one thing I didn't buy about the plot of this, I was like, why would Doctor Strange do this? Like Doctor Strange, just like, Peter just shows up on his doorstep, and Doctor Strange's like, all right, cool, let's do this really, like, crazy, and Wong even warns him. He's like, dude, this could go this could go really
also
sideways.
the Sorcerer Supreme. I want to make them
Exactly, and I'm just kind of like, why is Doctor Strange doing this? I understand it's like, well, we got to make this happen somehow, you know.
I haven't watched Doctor Strange, like the first movie, in a little bit, but I do recall that in that movie he was pretty prone to just being like, he was pretty prone to ignoring people when they told him, this thing is too dangerous for you to mess with.
I mean,
with.
that
like,
is
well,
much.
Fuck you, I'm Doctor Strange.
He's an arrogant asshole. It is within his character.
As bad
but
as
still.
an idea as it is, it tracks with everything he's done in the other movies. Plus
It's true.
The What If episode.
It's true, and it's like one of those things where you're like, I don't feel like Doctor Strange should do this after I've seen all of the shit, you know, that's happened with, you know, Endgame and all that. But then I'm like, but it is within his character. He is just a cocky bastard.
Doctor Strange let half the population of the universe get wiped out because he knew we had that had to happen.
That's true.
That was the only option.
And to Jeff's point, where he's like, "Oh, what a hero!" Well, even Doctor Strange in Endgame, when Tony, I was going to say Tony Hawk, when Tony Stark is talking to him, and Tony Stark's like, "What do you do?" Because he's being an asshole to Iron Man, basically, and he's like, dude, I just protect your reality. Like, I don't give a shit about you. I mean, they're actually butting heads in Endgame, and they don't even like each other because Doctor Strange is like, fuck all y'all. My only thing is to save reality. So now that you mention that is, I take it back. It makes perfect sense he would do something like this, I guess, because he's just a cocky, arrogant asshole.
Now, maybe his character grows in Multiverse of Madness, where he finally figures out that, like, okay, you know, maybe I do need to slow down with some of this shit. Like it's possible that Multiverse of Madness is what gives him is what kind of checks his ego, because the Marvel movies, like, to their credit, they do enjoy long-term character growth. Like, Tony Stark's character arc, he actually did have a genuine character arc throughout every last movie. His character changed, and what happened in one movie affects him in the next. It's possible that we'll see Doctor Strange kind of grow less willing to just, like, you know, play around with these spells that can alter the multiverse. Just on a whim.
Well, here's a question for you. I got two questions for you guys. Number one, so Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness comes out, I don't know, in a few months here, directed by Sam Raimi, who directed, obviously, the original Spider-Man trilogy. First question, do we see Spider-Man directed, a Spider-Man, whether it's Tobey or whoever, directed by Sam Raimi in Multiverse of Madness? And does the multiverse sort of, quote-unquote, end with Multiverse of Madness? Will the MCU kind of be like, all right, we're shutting it off at this point? We've had our fun with Loki. We've had our fun with No Way Home. We've had our fun with Multiverse of Madness. Does Doctor Strange fix everything by the end of this movie, where going forward we are not going to be worried about, okay, different multiverses and people coming in and out? Does it all end there? So I'll throw it to you, Steve, first. What do you think?
I don't think we're going to see Spider-Man. I feel like just a couple months later is too soon for them to play the ha, hey, look over here, there's another Spider-Man card. As for shutting off the multiverse, God, I fucking hope so. Like, I hate multiverse, I hate time travel. It's just an excuse for lazy writing. Like, hey, what if we had a universe where this happened? We don't have to explain it because the multiverse, so we're just going to do it. So I hope if Doctor Strange 2 makes it so that, you know, the multiverse is still out there because it's been created, but it doesn't actually, it can't actually, impact the MCU anymore, I am all about that, but I feel like that's something they would save for a Kang movie or show.
Yeah, and Kang is coming in, like, Ant-Man 3, right? So, I mean, you might just have your mind blown with all the time travel coming up soon. You got Kang the Conqueror being introduced.
I hate it.
Okay, Ronan, what do you think? Do we get Sam Raimi directing a scene, a cameo or something with Spider-Man in Multiverse of Madness? Because technically Tom Holland still has one more appearance on his MCU contract. So that's still out there. He can still appear in one more movie. Does he appear in Multiverse of Madness, and does Doctor Strange fix the multiverse problem by the end of that movie?
For as far as Spider-Man goes, I'm gonna say probably not. I'd heard, I don't even remember where I heard it, but I'd heard like a couple of years ago, like after Endgame, that like Tom Holland's next cameo in the MCU was supposed to be in the next Captain Marvel movie, the Marvels or whatever. I have no clue if it's accurate, considering how that's probably going to be happening in deep space, and I don't even remember where I heard it. So it could be absolutely.
Ronan's uncle works at Disney.
I can't imagine that, considering the end of No Way Home. Like, no one knows him. Like, Captain Marvel wouldn't even know him.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna assume that was probably horseshit. But as far as fixing the multiverse, I don't think it can be fixed, because it's always like, what is he going to destroy it? I mean, the most I can think of is that Doctor Strange is, at least currently right now, he's the only character who has the power and the tool set to actually access the multiverse. So you possibly, with the exception of like Loki or
that's the thing.
Asgardian
There's a season 2 of Loki coming. And what is Loki going to do? Is Loki going to try to fix it and make the one timeline again and make the TVA, put them back in their jobs of fixing all this stuff? Or, is it? And that's the thing. Like, I think it's just exciting to know, like, there's all kinds of crazy shit that's going to come in the next few years. It's going to be cool to see how they sort of piece it all together.
Yeah.
What I hope they don't do is just, please,
for example,
don't
Kate
make
Bishop,
it...
Kate Bishop is not going to have access to the multiverse. Neither is Sam Wilson. It's like Doctor Strange and or the Asgardian types. They're really the only ones that are going to. I'll also throw in possibly the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're the only characters that could possibly, through an adventure, get access into a multiverse. I'm going to kind of disagree with Steve, who says like all the multiverse kind of stuff is lazy. It's like Rick and Morty has made multiverse like their bread and butter for 5 seasons of TV, and it's not lazy. It's just depends on, it's when it's done poorly.
As with everything, right? If the writing is bad and it doesn't make sense, then it's not going to be good. But if they can come up with a cool reason for it.
If Kang the Conqueror is actually the next big bad, my awareness of him is through, again, like absorption of media. There was an animated TV show about 10 years ago, Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and Kang was like one of the various multi-episode villain arcs that were weaved throughout the first season of the show. So I have knowledge of what Kang the Conqueror is, and that he is a time-traveling type person. So it is also possible that Marvel is doing all of this stuff just to get people's head wrapped around the idea of time travel, because when Kang the Conqueror pops up, that's going to be like a main focal point, and people need to figure out how to digest it.
No.
Maybe the DC will cross over, like there's the Snyderverse Flash shows up.
I dread the day that Marvel tries to change the time travel rules from Endgame, where suddenly you can somehow impact your own timeline, because then the MCU just becomes the fucking Flash, and I don't want that.
Yeah, they have to tread carefully. I totally agree that one of my buddies at work is just a casual MCU fan, right? Like, he's not a fanboy. He doesn't dig into. He doesn't dig into, quote unquote. He's a normie. He just goes to the movies because, like, oh yeah, I like Thor or I like Spider-Man, whatever. I'm interested in just that sort of baseline, casual. I just want to be entertained sort of way. And he was telling me, he's like, I don't really get this, like, all of this stuff. He's like, this is going to be too much for me. This is going to be too much for me to try to wrap my head around if there's all these different universes and all these different people coming in, and I have to watch all these Disney Plus shows to be able to understand what's happening in these movies. And that's kind of like the danger, right? I think Kevin Feige and the MCU and all that, they've built this incredible machine. It's like the most successful movie franchise in history, right? And all in Hollywood history. And it's like, if you start losing the average person who is like, I don't get any of this, and there's too much content for me that's quote unquote required to consume for me to understand what's going on here, then they could be in a danger zone. And I could see at that point where they're kind of like, all right, Kang must be defeated at some point in time, right? But, personally, I think this is how they're going to bring Tony Stark back. I think you're going to see Robert Downey Jr. back at some point. I think you're going to see Chris Evans come back as Captain America at some point in time, because they're going to do all this time travel stuff. And, you know, they gave these big actors sort of the break. Yeah, we'll let you go do other things for, 5-6 years. Go do your pet projects that you've always wanted to do. But you'll come back to the MCU money, money when we do all this time travel shit. We set that all up. So, but I totally understand, Steve, the danger of they could certainly overplay their hand, like I'm doing right now in Providence Poker.
Couple years ago, like The Flash, back when I still watched it, they did their adaptation of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it was terrible. But at the end of it, they established that even though there's still a multiverse, like the way that you travel from one universe to the other, like it's gone. That's no longer a thing, and so the multiverse is just kind of gone. And I would love to see that in the MCU.
It could happen. It could happen.
If it's going to be used, please, moderation, discretion. Don't make it so that every show is suddenly dealing with the multiverse.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I'll sort of talk about before we start diving into our rankings of the various films is sort of like the end, sort of mid-credits sequence. So, I am not a fan of the character of Venom. I never have been. I've always thought Venom has been a shitty character. Venom has one good story, and that is the origin story that involves Spider-Man. That's it. Everything after that is just abject garbage. Don't talk to me about Flash Thompson, Venom, and like it's all garbage. So, I've never even seen the Sony Venom movies because I'm just that uninterested in the character. I just cannot stand that character. However, when they brought the Sony Venom, Eddie Brock, into the MCU, I was like, okay. Originally, I would have bet money. I was like, I'll bet you that sixth member of the Sinister Six, so to speak, in this movie, Venom's going to show up in the fight or something like that. That probably would have blown people's minds as well if they would have done that. But obviously, he popped into the MCU and then he just immediately popped out and they left the symbiote behind. I think you're going to get the actual what fans have always wanted, which is the real origin story of Venom and Eddie Brock in the MCU. I think they're clearly setting that up. So Sony's going to keep their Venom. You're going to see this symbiote, whether it's the next movie or the movie after that. You're going to see Spider-Man, the symbiote, attach, and that's how Venom's going to appear in the MCU. You're going to see the white spider emblem on Venom, which a lot of people have always wanted to see. That's where I feel it's going. Do you guys have any deviations from that? Do you think anything else?
Do you think that they're going to do Secret Wars, or do you
No.
think that? Because I never understood why the Raimi movie didn't just use the animated series origin, where it's just a specimen that J. Jonah Jameson's astronaut son brings back from space.
Yeah, because Spider-Man 2 actually sets that up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
set it up.
and I never understood why they didn't do that. But,
Raimi hates Venom, and Raimi didn't even want Venom in Spider-Man 3. Sony
get that, but
forced him to put it in.
If you're
That was
gonna
Javier
do
Rod
it,
that did that.
do it right.
No, I
But
agree
yeah,
with you. I agree with you.
I do think they're going to do a legit Venom story where it possesses Peter Parker. They're basically just going to make the Venom story from Spider-Man 3 but good.
Yeah.
What I don't get is, does Venom just have multiverse jumping powers?
Well, at the end of...
Because?
Because I watched the end credits of Venom 2, and the symbiote says that there's a hive mind across universes or whatever that would blow Eddie Brock's mind. And so everyone's like, well, obviously that's how Venom got into the MCU, because he must have known the Topher Grace Venom symbiote knew who Peter Parker was, and if there's a hive mind, that's sort of how they got transferred. I mean, to me, it's weak because I'm like Eddie Brock in that. I mean, I guess they would both kind of know. Like Eddie Brocks don't have a collective hive mind, so why was Tom Hardy there? I could understand if like the symbiote, if that's your explanation, that there's a hive mind that crosses multiverses with the symbiotes, and that's how the symbiote got in the MCU. Okay, I think it's a stupid excuse, but okay, I'll buy it. But Eddie Brock shouldn't have been there. Like Tom Hardy has no idea who that was.
I mean, Electro shouldn't have been there either.
Correct.
Jamie Foxx, like he doesn't know, he never saw like Andrew Garfield unmasked, right? Did he?
100%. Like if you watch Amazing Spider-Man 2, Electro never ever finds out that that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and even in the movie itself,
he says that in the movie.
Yeah.
He takes his mask off. He's like, "You're just a kid. I kind of expected you to be black."
Yeah. Now, like that one YouTuber I was watching, he was basically saying that maybe he knew it was Peter Parker at some point in that timeline, but had never seen Peter Parker's actual face, and so maybe he thought, I mean, that was sort of how he did it, but that's not explained, and that's definitely a plot hole. They can't sort of dance around that. And they can't even say it was Electro from a different time period, because when you first see Electro, he's in his blue state. Like, he's floating up there blue like he is in ASM2, and then he just overcharges himself, and that's how he becomes sort of yellow, the electric lightning and stuff. Which, come on, give me Electro in his classic costume. What do I have to do? What do I have to do to see Electro in his classic costume in a movie?
There are a lot of executives, Matt, that you are going to have to blow one by one.
I'll do it. Like, just line them up. Like, I think that costume is so awesome, and I feel like I'm the only person that believes that. And I think
I actually like. No, I love like traditional comic book costumes. Like, I think you could make the original Electro costume work, like by having him show up, in his, comic book starfish mask costume, and nobody takes him seriously.
Yeah,
and
Spider-Man
just
makes
kicks
fun of
his
him.
Ass, but then Electro gets like a power boost, and he's like, "I'm going to make you assholes respect this suit."
Yes, and that's how you get the humor with Peter Parker, because that's part of the thing with Spider-Man is he's funny. He makes quips and stuff like that. You see this guy who shows up in this outfit. Look what like Suicide Squad and that kind of stuff does, right? James Gunn did that kind of stuff great. You look at some of the quote-unquote superheroes in that, and they're ridiculous, and they make fun of it, and it's entertaining and it's fun. You could easily have Spider-Man making fun of Electro for his costume, and Electro being kind of oblivious to how stupid he looks. But to the comic book fans, they're like, we finally got it. To me, that's all I want, guys. I just want Electro in his classic costume.
You got the closest you're going to get, because when Jamie Foxx was like powering up with like when he was going like Super Saiyan or whatever,
they gave me a nod.
It's not the same. You did get to see the starfish on his face.
It's not the same.
Or
that's the closest you're going to get.
They could easily make this work, as much as I don't want them to. You just have a multiverse where people wear their normal costumes, and you could have that, and then you don't even have to say this is the real Electro.
Now here's a funny thing, Ronan, and I'll just segue real briefly into Hawkeye. There's a moment in Hawkeye when Kate Bishop is trying to get Hawkeye to wear a costume, because he doesn't really wear a costume.
She draws out the comic Hawkeye.
She draws the original costume with the H on his forehead and the wings over his eyes and everything like that. I'm like, that's a fantastic callback, to that. But how hilarious would it have been had those LARPers actually made that costume, and that's what he was forced to wear in the finale of Hawkeye? It would have been awesome, absolutely awesome, and no one can convince me it would.
It would not have been awesome, and I would have felt Jeremy Renner's pain.
No, it would have been awesome.
Because he was like I have a thing for Hawkeye. He's my favorite of all of those characters, because he's just the most grounded and normal. Anybody could be Hawkeye. It's like and then having to put him in that outfit. It's like, there's a reason why certain costumes don't get made in full on. Like, the certain things that work in 2D do not work in 3D, and there are thousands of terrible cosplays of people trying to make comic book outfits.
Those cosplayers don't have $1 million budgets for costuming. You can make it look cool.
You can have a costume that sticks to the comic aesthetic, but like updated, so instead of spandex, it looks like Kevlar or something like up to date. You can absolutely do this.
That's what they did with Hawkeye, because the outfit he's wearing is more akin to what Hawkeye was wearing in the Ultimates. It's like, so there you go. There's your comic book reference.
His costume in the Ultimates is not a costume.
Exactly. It's just a uniform.
It's fucking stupid.
Uniform.
It's stupid. Let me just say something.
He is a SHIELD agent, and he's just wearing a SHIELD uniform. That's all he needs.
Speaking of stupid, the stupidest part of No Way Home is Charlie Cox just showing up and going, "Don't even worry about that murder thing. You're fine."
Okay, I will say that was a little like, and I even told Alyssa, I was like, after the movie, I was like, I don't even really know how he got out of those murder charges. I know Daredevil showed up, but I was like still like, oh my god, it's Charlie Cox. I wasn't really paying attention to the dialogue, and I was like, I don't really know. And she was like, I don't really remember either. And then I told Steve, and Steve's like, oh, he just said blah blah or whatever. And I was like, oh.
What Murdoch tells him is that the charges are bogus and none of them are going to stick to you, because essentially,
there's no proof, right? Other than Mysterio saying he did it.
There's no proof outside of Mysterio saying it in the video, but there's no tangible evidence that puts Peter Parker there on the scene. Although he still gets outed as Spider-Man, and to me, I'm sort of like he should have. I think there was a way that he could have, tried his best. But I don't know what this guy's talking about. I'm not Spider-Man. Yeah, I think he would have had an option there, but regardless, that's rewriting the movie. That's not the movie that we got. That's trying to invent a different movie.
Yeah, we don't want to have Peter Parker on trial. we don't need that movie, right?
You know what pissed me off? This is something that pretty much bugs me about any superhero story after there's been a team up, and that is really there's a bunch, 5 multiversal villains showing up. You can't call Falcon, maybe he's Captain America at this point. You can't give a call to Winter Soldier, even if they can't come help. None of the surviving Avengers were willing to do an interview where they said, Peter Parker's the good guy, he helped us blip people back. He just got abandoned.
Well, I'm trying to think, because they kind of touch on that in the movie, I thought, where there was who's still kind of around at this time? Because I guess I'm kind of, where does this take place in the MCU timeline? For example, Falcon and Winter Soldier, that takes place, he becomes Captain America, that's fairly shortly after after what do they call it? Not the blip, but whatever the snapback is. This is months,
a couple months after.
Yeah. So I guess it's where is everybody? Obviously Iron Man's gone, Captain America's gone. Who was he with in Endgame and all of that stuff? Captain Marvel's gone; she's off planet.
War Machine is still there. Falcon is still there. Winter Soldier is still there. There are
Ant-Man still
But did
there.
they know? Did War Machine know that Peter Parker was Spider-Man?
He knew who he was. Yeah, remember in Civil War? Yeah, they were on the same side.
But I'm just in my head. I'm just thinking, did he ever see him with his mask off?
I know certain characters did. Spider-Man. I'm not saying they need to go on camera and say Peter Parker is not Spider-Man. I think when Peter Parker is accused of murder and becomes public enemy number 1, why do none of his superhero friends?
Yeah, that's a good point, because you could say Doctor Strange, why don't you get out there in front of a freaking microphone and tell them I'm a good guy? That's a good point. That's a good point. Shut up, Jeff. This doesn't fall apart. We're putting it back together again.
I have that problem with any superhero story or show after this.
At this point, we just kind of had to accept that this is just how things are.
Yeah, because if you look at actual comic books itself, every single time a character has a storyline, you could always say, well, let's just bring in one of the 1,000 other characters to come in and help them clean up this mess or whatever. I think there is a bit of you just got to roll with it to a lot of this stuff, and I think that's fine. Honestly, I think it's fine. I know, Steve, it drives you kind of crazy.
It does.
But to me, I'm
God damn it.
let's just roll with it. Are you having a good time with it? I'm having a great time with it. Let's just roll with it. So, but overall, okay, so we all agree Spider-Man No Way Home was an awesome movie. Definitely worth a watch. If 6 months after this movie is released and you're finally listening to this podcast and you're like, wow, I'm going to check this movie out, definitely go check it out. So let's roll into our rankings of the Spider-Man films. Now, there's a couple of them that you guys did not see. There's 9 total. 3 Raimis, 2 Webbs. Who's the guy? What am I thinking? John Watts. 3 Watts films and Into the Spider-Verse.
Mark Webb, isn't it?
Mark Webb did Amazing Spider-Man. John Watts did
right. Yeah.
the MCU ones. And then there's Into the Spider-Verse. Now, also, one interesting aside that I was going to say about the Venom situation that I forgot to mention is the reason why I think it's going to be the real origin of Venom from the comic books is because John Watts is directing Fantastic Four. Reed Richards is a major part of that Venom origin story because Reed Richards is the character that discovers that it's a symbiote that's basically going to permanently attach itself to Peter Parker. So that's why I'm excited to see the real Venom origin story. But yeah, as a side. So we'll start with number 9. I don't know if you guys want to how you want to do it with the ones that you haven't seen. Ronan, what is your number 9?
In terms of worst, the worst one that I've seen, I'm gonna have to make it Spider-Man 3, but I'm gonna give an honorable mention to Amazing Spider-Man 2 because I have not seen Amazing Spider-Man 2, but everything I've heard is that movie is fucking awful. So but Spider-Man 3, yeah, I'm gonna put that on because of the ones that I've seen. That's definitely the worst one. I'm not saying that it's dog. I'm not gonna constantly bash on it the way they go overboard with bashing on it. And I think this bitch is playing with me, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna call it. But I think I got a good hand.
We're still playing poker, everybody.
I think I got a good hand.
There's a girl that's trying to take Ronan down right now.
Her avatar is a girl. I don't know.
Oh, she just got the ace. Oh, you got 3 queens. Yeah, you're gonna beat her. Good job, Ronan. Good job.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
You fucker. Anyway.
Okay, so that's your number 9.
I would say that I've only ever seen it once. That was the first Blu-ray I ever got. It came with the PlayStation 3 that I bought.
Spider-Man 3?
Yeah, it came with the PlayStation 3. I bought a PlayStation 3 specifically to play Metal Gear Solid 4, and it came with that Spider-Man 3 Blu-ray. So that's when I finally watched it, and that's I haven't seen it since then. I've literally only watched it once. It's possible that the movie has kind of, with time, evolved into one of those fascinatingly bad movies that becomes, interesting to watch. I know that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes... I know it's a lot of behind-the-scenes studio battling as to why that movie is so bad. It didn't have to be that way. It's kind of like Alien 3 or the first Suicide Squad. It's bad because the studios fucked with it. But it doesn't change the fact that it's not a good movie.
Okay. All right. So Spider-Man 3 is your number 9. This is going to get a little
honorable
wonky
mention
here,
to
we'll get there. We'll get there because we're going in reverse order here. So you might want to put Spider-Man ASM2 as your number 8 or something. Steve, your number 9. Is there one that you haven't seen that you would slot into the number 9 slot? Just by default.
I haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse, so I don't want to rank it. The worst one that I have seen, whether you call it my number 8, my number 9, whatever.
Well, hold on. So you'll be number 8 then, because you've seen all the other ones, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to you
worst.
at number 8.
All right.
Okay, so my number 9 is Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, the reason why it's my number 9 is obviously, like I said, I rewatched all of these before No Way Home, and this thing is just the Webb Spider-Man films are just boring. And it's sad because there's things in it that I like. I like that they went with Gwen Stacy in those movies as the character. Mary Jane is not the original love interest of Peter Parker. So I like that they did the Gwen Stacy thing. I like that they did the Gwen Stacy storyline where she dies, because that's the thing about Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man is he's defined by the tragedies that have happened to him, whether it's Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, all of that stuff. And so I appreciated that they were trying to do that, but man, those movies are a slog. They're just not fun at all. They're just kind of I watch those movies and I'm just kind of this is it's too much, right? It's too much and yet not enough, because it's too much boring and not enough sort of like actual Spider-Man. It doesn't feel like Peter Parker. It doesn't feel like Spider-Man to me. And they did my boy Electro dirty. It's him too. I gotta put it at number 9. It's gotta be the worst one. So my number 9 is Amazing Spider-Man 2. So Steve, what is your number 8? Which would be your first one.
Spider-Man 3, like not even close. Like no part of that movie worked for me. I still cannot get over the fact that Harry Osborn's butler 5 years later just said, "Oh, by the way, everything."
I fucking forgot that happened.
Yeah, I did.
Everything that you thought about your father's death is wrong. You hating your best friend for killing your father is wrong, and I have known this that entire time. And I just didn't bother to tell you until now.
Are you telling me that didn't make sense? Are you trying to tell me that didn't make sense? What if that guy had dementia for 5 years, Steve?
Didn't he even say to him, it's like, I cleaned your father's wounds that night.
Yeah, he did.
His own glider killed him.
Yeah, I saw a fan theory one time that said that guy was just a hallucination of Harry Osborn, who's now on the Goblin Serum. But then that raises the question of how did... That means that Harry Osborn deep down knew all of this, and then my question is how. Anyway, it didn't make sense. Spider-Man 3, worst Spider-Man movie, not close.
Okay, so that's your number 8. Ronan, do you have a number 8? Do you have one that you haven't seen that you want to slot in there?
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the only one that I haven't seen. So
okay.
I suppose I will put it in at this spot. Just be like that, or either it could be an honorable mention for 9. It's whatever. Everything I have heard about it. And it mostly comes to the writing, and that's mostly because it is a what's the fuck's Kirksman and Orsi, or whoever the fuck those two that duo is, who did the Star Trek 2, and one of them is still doing Star Trek movies, and the other one is a 9/11 truther.
What are we talking about here?
Okay, we got it, Ronan. We got it. Let's not get into the 9/11
number
truthers.
8?
My number 8 is Amazing Spider-Man. The first.
Well, what was Ronan's number 8? I thought Ronan was still talking about...
Ronan had Spider-Man 3 as number 9, and he had ASM 2 as number 8. So
you made me put the movie that I didn't see as number 9. You didn't do that with Ronan, so now...
No. But what I said was, like, do you want to put one that you haven't seen just slotted into the number 9 spot? You said no, so we just went right to your number 8.
This whole thing is off the rails.
Okay, it's off the rails.
I'm done with it.
Okay. So my number 8 is obviously Amazing Spider-Man, the first one with Andrew Garfield. Really had a viscerally negative reaction to this, primarily because of Andrew Garfield. I didn't buy him as Peter Parker. I don't really like the Lizard as a villain. The Lizard wanting to just turn the whole city into lizards. I mean, come on. I mean, I know there's a level of buy-in I have to have with this kind of superhero stuff, and I do. I buy in on a lot of stuff, clearly. But no, this was a bridge too far for me. Couldn't do it. So ASM is my number 8. So the two Garfield ones are clearly, in my opinion, the worst of it. So now we're going to go to number 7. Steve, what's your number 7?
Number 7 is Amazing Spider-Man 2. Bad movie. Really wanted to like it. I will say that I enjoy Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man more than Tobey Maguire, because Andrew Garfield actually makes the quips and the one-line. Tobey Maguire is a great Peter Parker, crappy Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield is the reverse.
You're killing me.
Anyways, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is
number
next
7
to last.
Okay, so Ronan, you're number 7.
All right, we're gonna have to put in like a little stopwatch or something like that here, because I need to let the dog out and put him in the kennel for the night. So I'd like if we're gonna have to pause it right here. I'm sitting out. Hopefully,
okay, we're gonna pause. We're gonna pause, and we're gonna wait with bated breath for Ronan's number 7. Let's talk a little bit about. Okay, well, you go do that, Ronan.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, Steve, you and I can talk about the different Spider-Man.
We're cutting all of this out of the show, right?
Maybe, we'll see. It depends on how lazy I am, I guess. If I'm so let's talk about the different Spider-Men, right? Obviously, we've had Tobey Maguire, we've had Andrew Garfield, and we've had Tom Holland. In your opinion, I know you already said it, but let's just repeat it again. In your opinion, of the 3, who is the best Peter Parker?
The best Peter Parker? It's Tom Holland is the best everything.
The best everything? Okay, so
Yeah.
you think he's the best Peter Parker and the best Spider-Man?
I do, yes.
Why?
Absolutely.
Why are you wrong? Please tell me.
I am not wrong. Tom Holland is the best everything because he's the only Spider-Man where I don't have to make that distinction between who was good inside and outside of the mask. Like Tom Holland, he's nerdy, he's into science. Then he puts on the mask and he's making the quips and the one-liners.
Give me a Tom Holland quip that you love.
I can't because
okay.
you put me on the spot.
There you go. I've just proved the point. Okay, go ahead. Continue.
No, Tom Holland gets both sides of the Spider-Man and Peter Parker identity correct, in my opinion.
Okay, and I think that's actually no matter how much shit I give you, I think that's actually a good point because I do think that you with Tom Holland, aside from the fact that the MCU movies up to this point had established him as sort of like Iron Man Jr., where, you know, Tony Stark has given him his suit, and I think that's why Tom Holland right now, he could certainly reach that level to me with the next ones, because believe me, I think Tom Holland's great as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. I totally agree with you there, but in my view, he's not quite Peter Parker because I've yet to see a movie with him being Peter Parker / Spider-Man, like the real Spider-Man. He up until Aunt May dies in No Way Home, and at the very end where he's like, okay, now I'm actually on my own. I haven't actually seen a story where he is the traditional Spider-Man, right? So to me, bar none, it always will be. It's going to be Tobey Maguire for me. I feel like Tobey Maguire was obviously, I think, head and shoulders, he's the best Peter Parker in my mind. I think he just sort of exudes. Tom Holland still has that kind of cool guy sort of attitude a little bit in my view. I don't look at him as like this super uncool nerdy character. He's got all these like science class friends in school. They go on field trips and win decathlons and all of this various stuff, and he's very popular amongst a segment of his school and everything. To me, the traditional sort of Peter Parker is Tobey Maguire. Everybody, like, he doesn't really have any friends, right? He's always getting,
aside from his two best friends, Mary Jane Watson and Harry Osborn.
Well, that's okay. So you wouldn't really call Mary Jane. Okay, so you're making me rethink this. They
become friends, and then it progresses, and maybe there was always a spark there. But they are definitely just good friends for at least a while in that film series.
I agree, but to me it feels differently, or feels different, because I like the way that Tobey Maguire portrays Peter Parker, and that, like, literally everything goes wrong, right? Like he gets knocked over all the time. People are even in that opening scene when he's sort of quote unquote getting pushed around by Flash Thompson and whatnot. Mary Jane just sort of like isn't thinking of him as like, oh, you're a cool guy, I want to hang out with you and stuff. Just kind of like, oh, wow, sort of thing. Her and Harry, they're kind of doing their own thing for a lot of it. So he doesn't feel like, what am I saying? I don't even know what I'm saying. Tom Holland doesn't feel like that to me. Tom Holland feels like he's got a greater support system from the very beginning around him.
I can see that.
Okay, so that's kind of what I'm saying.
I look at Tom Holland like Tom Holland has MJ, he has Ned, and he has Aunt May. He's got people like close to him. He has superhero friends, obviously.
He's got tons of superhero friends.
All of the people you're talking about in the science groups and whatnot, I don't look at those as being Peter Parker's friends.
I think for example, in not Far From Home, Homecoming, when they're going to the decathlon and stuff, all of those people want him there. They all have sequence scenes where they're like, oh, Peter, like, you got to be here. I can't remember the initial love interest in Homecoming, the Vulture's daughter. She's like interested in, like, there's a plethora of people, and I don't feel like Tom Holland in the MCU really sort of captures comic book Peter Parker, whereas Tobey Maguire does. Now, to your question about Tobey Maguire, your ridiculous statement about Tobey Maguire not being good as Spider-Man, that's insane. That's just insane. He's awesome as Spider-Man. He's just absolutely awesome as Spider-Man. The only thing that I would critique about his thing is I would have liked to have seen more science from him in the originals. I wanted him to have the web shooters.
I would have liked to have seen more one-liners and quips and sarcastic anything.
I think he calls Green Goblin Gobby at one point in time. That wasn't good enough for him.
No, it wasn't. I have a question. So I want to sidebar this best Spider-Man conversation for a second.
Jeff also has a question here too. Do you want me to just throw that in real quick?
No.
Okay.
What's Jeff's question?
Jeff's question is: skip this sausage fest stuff. Which version has the hottest love interest?
That is easily Kirsten Dunst, not close.
Not close, yeah. Tobey Maguire, for sure. Emma Stone looks like a bug. Not into Emma Stone, not into Zendaya, so Kirsten Dunst, easily.
Alright, so my question for you. You and I have talked like once or twice about the Spider-Man 2019 PS4 game.
Yeah.
And spoilers for anyone who hasn't played that, Aunt May dies in it. And that took me out of the game, because I felt like when that happened, this just became another it sucks to be a superhero story, which I am so tired of. But, and you said you were okay with that, because that's, the old Parker luck, as you put it.
Parker luck, so, that's the thing in the comics.
Everything so you're talking about Tobey Maguire, and how in his movie, everything went against him, and that's why you think he's the best Peter Parker. So my question to you is, why do you enjoy seeing a character that you love suffer?
Because I'm a masochist or something. No, okay. So let me get all the way back to get a little personal here. Not super personal.
What did I miss?
You have to listen to it in 6 months.
Yeah. Basically, we're trying to discuss, Ronan, who is the superior Peter Parker Spider-Man? Is it Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom Holland? And then Jeff, real quick, had a side question, and Ronan, I'll throw it to you real quick. Which version of Spider-Man has the hottest love interest, in your opinion? You don't need to think about this. It's obviously.
Yeah.
It's either going to be Kirsten Dunst or the more hot kind of punk rock version of Gwen Stacy from the Spider-Verse.
What? The cartoon? Okay, all right. Forget it, Ronan. Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm folding this hand real quick because I can't even focus. Jeez. Oh my God. Okay, Ronan. So the reason why I always identified with Peter Parker and Spider-Man, because like I said, I was introduced to the comics in the 80s. Is because, I felt like I was that person. Like, I was that kid who was like an outsider. I did get bullied when I was in like elementary school and stuff like that, and I didn't have tons and tons of friends and things of that nature. And so like I really identified with that character, because I always felt like, God dang, like everything's going wrong. Like I can't win, right? Even when I do something good, I screw everything up, so to speak. And so that's the reason why I identified and latched on with that character when, I was like 6 and 7 years old, because that's how I felt at that time.
So I can get you identifying with it, but let me put it this way. If you were writing the script for Spider-Man 2019, would you have killed Aunt May, or would you have saved her in that scene?
I probably wouldn't have killed her in that game, but I definitely would have killed her in the next game, because let me explain. Spider-Man, like to me, and this is my personal opinion, the best heroes are defined by tragedy, right? Spider-Man and Peter Parker / Spider-Man, however you want to frame it, would not be the hero they are without the tragedies that have befallen them, right? So this isn't something like, Batman, where Batman's walking down an alley with his parents when he's 5, and some dude just jumps out and guns down his parents, and he gets pissed off, and he decides, I'm going to be a superhero, blah, blah, blah. This is like, the Uncle Ben stuff, that's his fault, right? That he directly, or indirectly caused, the death. Regardless of what Spider-Man 3 decides to retcon with the Sandman, he caused that sort of death. And as Alyssa always likes to laugh when Spider-Man, essentially snaps Gwen Stacy's back. Couldn't save her. I mean, everything that he did put her in that situation, so she has to die, right? Because with the death comes, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And that's what also, wrapping back around to No Way Home, that was great. They made that moment in the movie when Tobey Maguire, like that scene with Tom Holland, and he's just breaking down on the roof, and his friends just come up and are hugging him. Great acting, by the way. Just FYI to Tom Holland, he did the best he's done as Peter Parker in these movies was in this one. But it's that scene, and Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield come down, and they're like, "Dude, this happened to us too. That's what happened. It's basically what happens to us. No matter what we do, something bad's going to happen, and we have to deal with it. We have to shoulder that sort of shit in order to try to, continue being the hero that we need to be for other people. We got to sacrifice
you gotta carry
stuff.
that weight.
Yeah, you got to carry that weight, and I love that about the character. So yes, Aunt May must die. Yes, she must die. Or Ned or MJ, rather than Gwen Stacy, could have had her back snapped or something like that. Regardless, Spider-Man needed to have that. And in the MCU, Tom Holland Spider-Man did not have that until this movie. So, yes, Aunt May must die.
Okay.
It does, like, on a side note, make one wonder what happened to Tom Holland's Uncle Ben. Because he's never mentioned. They mention him. Ben has ever been mentioned.
He mentions to Ned in Homecoming. He's like, after what happened to my uncle, whatever. But yeah, they never explain exactly what happened, which is good because I love the fact that Aunt May. It's like George Lucas said, it's like poetry, right? It's Aunt May that dies in this multiverse, doing the same exact thing that Uncle Ben would have done, serving that purpose. So I'm fine with it. I'm totally cool with it. Ronan, you're number 7. Don't say something stupid.
Oh, back to the list.
My number 7 is going to be The Amazing Spider-Man.
Why?
It's for all the stuff we mentioned about Andrew Garfield. Fine actor, just the way that he just doesn't work. And I guess that was the way they were trying to make this Spider-Man. The hip, I'm going to be skateboarding in school. I'm so cool, Spider-Man. And also the villain is just lame. And you can tell from the get-go that they're already trying to set up some kind of a multiverse sort of thing with not multiverse, a cinematic universe via Oscorp, because they're already this ultra bad company that's doing weird genetic stuff, and okay, this is where all the villains are going to come from. They're all going to be connected from here. So you could see the seeds early on, but nothing works. It's just the actors are good. The only real good thing in it is that Andrew Garfield. And is it Emma Watson? Is that her name?
Emma Watson. Emma Stone.
No, Emma Stone.
Emma Stone. Yeah. That's it. Emma Stone. Yeah.
Emma Stone.
Mantis. They work well.
Okay, so your number 7 is Amazing Spider-Man. I think we're all kind of in agreement about the shittier ones. Well, maybe there's one that's going to be on my list that's gonna. Not agree with you guys, but
Ronan, Matt's going to take a big dump on Spider-Man 2.
No. My number 7 is actually Far From Home. Now I will preface this by saying that at this level, I like all of the rest of the Spider-Man films.
At this point, it's a gradient scale.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things about Spider-Man is it seems like the vast majority of his films are just generally good films. Whereas some of the other superheroes maybe wouldn't say that have this big. There's a lot of Batman movies that are bad. So, but Far From Home, this one. I don't know. I like it just fine. I think Jake Gyllenhaal's great. Mysterio is probably my second favorite Spider-Man villain. So I was excited to see Mysterio. I like what they did with it, where it's kind of like this upgraded weird tech sort of thing, doing illusions all over the place. I liked all of it. When I rewatched it, I was like, well, this is just all right. I wasn't sort of blown away by it or anything like that. And so that's why it kind of lands at number 7 for me. Is like, enjoyed it. I would watch it again, absolutely. But wasn't it didn't crack that top tier for me. So Far From Home. Now my number 7. So Steve, let's go with your number 6.
So let's see. I just did Amazing Spider-Man 2, so I'm going to say Amazing Spider-Man 1. Mostly, even I don't have nearly the problems with Andrew Garfield that you guys do, but the Lizard is such a shit tier villain.
Yeah, he doesn't help.
I feel like Dennis Leary with a shotgun could have handled the Lizard.
Yeah, should have been Cardiac. I'm telling you, they should have put Cardiac in there. Anyway, go ahead.
I didn't even call that. Fuck.
Okay, that's fair. So Ronan, your number 6.
My number 6. Let me see here. At this point, it's a grading scale. They're all good from here on in. It's just what level of good. And I suppose if my arm is gonna be twisted, I guess at this point I'm gonna put in Spider-Man: Homecoming. It's
okay.
The Vulture is a really great villain. It's like all the Spider-Man movies do the villains right. They're they're the Marvel movies that don't have the weak villain complex like all the other ones do, where the villain sucks. No, the Spider-Man movies, their villains are good. Their characters, Michael Keaton was great in this movie as the Vulture. But having said all of that, this is this one is the most marbly of all of the Spider-Man movies, where it's good. I like watching it, but it's just good.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I disagree, but it's fair. Okay, so Steve, wait, you said you're number 6 already, right, Steve? So I'm on 6. Spider-Man 3 is my number 6, and I like Spider-Man 3. I rewatched it, the Sam Raimi version, obviously. I rewatched it before No Way Home, and I'm like, this film does not need the amount of shit that's thrown its way. Yes, the Venom stuff is super rushed and thrown in. It makes no sense. My biggest problem with Spider-Man 3, honestly, is the fact that the Sandman retcon. It was Sandman that actually killed Uncle Ben, and it wasn't the actual guy that Peter Parker let escape, because I feel like that decision completely undermines Peter Parker and Spider-Man as a character. I mean, I feel like that's kind of unforgivable. I like the idea of Sandman. I like that he is just trying to get back and, steal money to try to, help his daughter with whatever disease she has and stuff like that. All that's good. But retconning him to be the one just randomly that actually accidentally killed Uncle Ben, again, Uncle Ben needs to die. He needs to die in a way. He needs to die in a way that it's Peter Parker's fault, because his selfish attitude was what led to the tragedy. With great power, there must also come great responsibility, and Spider-Man 3 undermines that completely. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't think Topher Grace is terrible as Eddie Brock in this. Not gonna lie.
You shut the hell up.
No.
Bold.
Okay,
let me try to back this up.
Your opinion's invalid.
Let me try to back this up.
Dislike, unsubscribe.
So I'm the context here is Jeff. I know Jeff's out there. I know he agrees with me on this. So the thing about Venom, obviously, I'm already biased in a way that I think Venom sucks as a character. I just think it sucks. However, I will say that Topher Grace played this role. Cocky ass attitude, trying to basically undermine Peter at every point in time. Yeah, like Jeff says, going to the church, asking God to kill Spider-Man. It works. I'm telling you guys, go back and rewatch it. It's not nearly as viscerally bad as you remember it being. And I think Topher Grace has gotten a lot of sort of shit over time, because he doesn't look like the giant muscle-bound Eddie Brock. It's not the Eddie Brock from the comics, and I think that
he's also just the wrong pick for that character in general. But go on, keep going, being wrong.
I think I kind of like the way that I like that Raimi cast Topher Grace, and because it's unexpected, right? And so I like that he's a weasel throughout this whole thing. I like that he's trying to undercut Peter at every opportunity. I like that the fact that that's why when Peter gets a symbiote, he's basically like throws him up against the wall, and basically it's he's taking his rage out on this like asshole coworker that's basically taking his job. I like it. I like Topher Grace as Venom. Now, I don't like Venom as a character. Again, I think it's stupid. However, I don't think it's nearly as bad. So I am pro Topher Grace in Spider-Man 3, and I am anti-Sandman in Spider-Man 3, which I think back in the day I might have been opposite. Because I think I even got wrapped up in that moment after we watched it, and we're like, oh my god, they did what? Because it wasn't exactly comics accurate, and I felt Sandman was better, and Venom was awful, but I think it's actually the reverse under a repeat viewing. Now, the thing about Spider-Man 3, it's still a solid movie. The problem with Spider-Man 3 is that Raimi decided to do that horrible scene in the middle of Peter Parker doing his dance moves and all that stuff. It's just, it kills the momentum of the movie. It's funny in memes, 20 years later, that's fine. Like, it's hilarious.
Tobey
But
Maguire.
it kills the movie. It's like Tobey Maguire just tussling his hair in front of his eyes, and suddenly now he's a bad boy. It's so cringy.
Doesn't he flirt with, like, what's your name at the Daily Bugle? Betty White?
Betty Brant. Betty White. Ronan, oh my god. Yeah, Betty White. He was hitting on Betty White at the Daily Bugle, Ronan. But,
R.I.P.
yeah, he also...
She's brushing her hair. Oh, Peter.
Well, here's the thing. He also, Gwen Stacy is in Spider-Man 3. Gwen Stacy is J. Jonah Jameson's daughter. Is that it? Or am I thinking of that wrong?
No,
anyway, it's Bryce Dallas Howard who plays Gwen Stacy, and he's trying to get with her to make Mary Jane jealous and everything like that. It's just too much. There's too much that was handled too poorly in that film. However, I still feel it's a solid watch. So that is my number 6, Spider-Man 3. Come at me. Number 5, Steve. What's your number 5?
I'm gonna say Spider-Man 1. As much as I love Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, I remember seeing that movie and my reaction to disliking Tobey Maguire as as Spider-Man being instant. I immediately hated deadpan Spider-Man, and that's where it began.
Okay. The original Raimi Spider-Man is your number 5.
My number 5, so it's right in the middle, which doesn't mean bad.
Doesn't mean bad.
It's just not as good as the rest.
At this point, again, it's a gradient scale of good. They're all good from this point onward.
They're all
I've changed
at least
my mind. It's my number 11.
Number 11? Okay, Ronan, you're number 5.
It's Spider-Man 1.
What?
Word.
Wow.
It deserves props because it is the movie that kind of proved, although you had Blade 1 before, years beforehand, but this is the movie that really proved that superhero movies could work, and that silly comic book material, if treated well and treated seriously, could make money. All you have to do is just tell the story seriously. It deserves props for that, and it sets up the formula that a lot of these movies still use to this day. But at the same time, it's just so much more has happened. It deserves props, special props for being the one that started it all. But being the first doesn't make it the best.
Okay, all right. My number 5 is Spider-Man: Homecoming, and that was the first MCU full film. Obviously, he was in Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame and whatnot as a character, but I really liked this sort of introduction to Spider-Man in the MCU and his whole proper thing. I think you're absolutely right, Ronan. I think Michael Keaton is awesome in this. That scene in the car when he figures out that Peter, who's going to homecoming with his daughter, is Spider-Man, and he turns around, he's got that gun in his hand, he's like, I'm going to murder everyone you love. He's so good, and that's the thing, you get these really high caliber actors in this sort of comic booky stuff, and they can elevate what would otherwise be kind of a goofy sort of scene, right? And Michael Keaton was just so awesome in that role, and I love the fact at the end that no matter what, Iron Man takes the suit away from him, and he basically just got his, hoodie on and sweatpants, and he still goes and he saves the Vulture from basically blowing himself up. And I'm like, that is quintessential Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man could have let him die, right? He could have let him die, but he didn't. He's like, I'm going to save you, blah, blah. And so, I think Homecoming is really awesome. We're getting to the point now where I'm like, these are the movies I really, really love as Spider-Man, but Homecoming is my number 5.
Yeah, from here on out, it's really hard to split the difference.
Yeah, it is. Steve, you're number 4.
Homecoming.
Okay.
For pretty much all the reasons you just said. How did I sit out there? I don't know what happened to the game. Anyways, Homecoming is great. There's not any part of the movie that I really dislike. It's just, in my opinion, the Tom Holland movies just got better consistently.
Yeah, better and better. Okay. Your number 4, Ronan?
My number 4 is going to be Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay, why is that?
I remember watching this movie, and it was just, the visual style to it, the music style that was going on in the background, and this was a brand new kind of origin story because Miles Morales is a different kind of Spider-Man. He has his own. He doesn't have an Uncle Ben moment, but he not with his actual Uncle Ben, but he has that own moment in it. And you get to see these other interesting Spider-Men, although that's kind of the part where it's like I could have done without Spider-Ham and without
you
Anime
shut
Girl
your
Spider-Man.
mouth. Spider-Ham is adorable and God.
Or Nick Cage randomly being in there because Nick Cage is kind of the internet meme at this point.
Spider Noir, oh come on, those are awesome parts of the movie. Spider-Ham is amazing.
Those characters, all the movie needed was Peter B. Parker and Gwen Stacy. Those are the only characters that really matter in helping Miles Morales become Spider-Man. And once he does, and once it really kicks off, and he starts battling Kingpin at the end of it, everything just comes together. And the leap of faith moment, jumping off of the building, and then doing his very first swinging, it's that's all great. That's my number 4. That was that's a really good movie, solid movie, really good.
Okay. My number 4 is Into the Spider-Verse. Now, I will preface this by stating that before this movie came out, I had a conversation with Steve. And I'm like, Steve...
I was just about to bring this up.
Yes, I was like, Steve, I hate the idea of multiversal Spider-Man. I hate it. And the reason why I hated it, I was like, because if you have all of these different spider people with spider powers, what makes Peter Parker unique? There is no more uniqueness to Peter Parker. He's just one of a zillion different spider people flying around doing the same stuff that he does. He loses all of that. And I was a very, very big skeptic. And this is coming from someone who is a giant Spider-Man fan. I think Dan Slott did this whole Spider-Verse storyline 5 or 6 years ago.
Loon.
Oh
Moreland,
God! I'm just
I'm
like, oh my God! And there's this whole web of the Spider-Verse, and that's where the spider sense comes from. You can feel the vibrations on this web throughout the universe, and there's all these different spider people. I'm like, this is awful. This is just awful. And I was a huge skeptic. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna like this. I'm like, I feel like this is probably gonna be the first Spider-Man movie I've ever seen that I just absolutely despise. And I watched it, and I thought it was brilliant. I was completely wrong. So I did a whole 180, all the way back around. I was like, this is so brilliantly done, right? I mean, just with all of the different characters, and the animation was great. And I've never been a big Miles Morales fan, just because my whole thing with Miles Morales is can't he be his own character? Why does he have to be Spider-Man? Can't Miles stand on his own, sort of thing? That was my opinion.
This movie now.
Yeah, this movie changed it all. And I think that's part of the power of this movie is it took somebody who was very skeptical and did not believe that this could be done properly, and I was like, I was wrong, absolutely wrong. I can buy this, and so I think this Into the Spider-Verse actually helped with my enjoyment of No Way Home. Because then I was like, I'm ready to see Toby and Andrew Garfield. Give it to me. Put it in front of my eyeballs. Whatever crappy scenario you need to do to put it in front of my eyeballs, just do it because it's going to be awesome and fantastic. So, Into the Spider-Verse is my number 4. So, Steve, we'll go to number 3. What's your number 3?
I'm going to say Far From Home. At this point, again, we're just talking about the best of the best. If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
told me that Far From Home should be 2 instead of 3, like, I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. Mysterio is just fantastic in this movie. Like,
And they
I would
made him
watch...
look like I wish they would have made Electro look.
Yeah,
They made him
exactly.
comic accurate, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh, it's ridiculous. Like Alyssa's like, he's a fishbowl. He's got a fishbowl for a head. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's what he does in the comics.
If they made Mysterio work, they can make Electro work.
Yes,
but,
truer
I would
words have
watch.
never been
I would
spoken.
watch a movie just about Mysterio. Like, I mean, if there is a multiverse world out there where Mysterio's story was legit and he was a good guy, I would watch it because I loved everything about that character.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
The end. What else do you want from me?
The end. Okay, so you're number 3, Ronan. What do you got?
My number 3 is Far From Home. Needless to say, we've said the Jake Gyllenhaal thing is great. It's his dynamic. Every movie he has a different Peter Parker, let me rephrase that, has a different dynamic with like some older mentor character. In the first, in a Homecoming, he's got this kind of fatherly figure thing with Tony Stark. Far From Home, he doesn't have that anymore. But Jake Gyllenhaal's kind of the cool uncle that you can go visit, who lets you ride the 4-wheelers and shit like that. So that's kind of the way he plays the character in this movie. And then it just they had that scene in the bar, and it just all the characters start to fade away in the background. He's like, that wasn't so hard, was it?
Yeah, just manipulation, right? You're manipulating a teenage kid who's just got all of this weight thrown on him, and he's like, well, what? It's just great. And again, it's when you get a great actor, because Jake Gyllenhaal's a great actor. When you get a great actor in these kind of roles, just like Michael Keaton in there, it's like, I buy it, man. Like, I buy that this guy, this seasoned adult, would just completely screw this kid over and manipulate a kid that way.
Remember when we all thought that Far From Home was going to be the movie that introduced the multiverse?
Yeah, that's true. Mysterio actually says that the multiverse is real. Now, I don't know if he actually believed it or not, but he did say that the multiverse was real in that.
Yep.
Okay, so that was number 3.
Well, yeah, I also want to give prop. This movie does have the fight that Spider-Man has with all the drones on the London Bridge. To me, that's of all these Spider-Man movies, that's probably the best Spider-Man like web slinging fighting action out of all of it. Like the tricks that he does with the webs, where he
I'd
uses
probably
it as a
agree with that.
springboard to do other that's also part of why I put it up that high. It's like I watched that on an IMAX screen. That was the first time I've ever seen anything on an IMAX. Usually I'm like, IMAX is overrated. This is bullshit. This is like 3D. It's dumb.
What I think
that was the one where I was watching it. I was like, holy goddamn! Like it's like that was great.
Well, what I think is interesting about Far From Home is the ending. So obviously we were like, oh man, I wish Mysterio hadn't died. But I think that directly reinforces Peter Parker's decision to try to cure all of the villains in No Way Home, because it's coming off right when basically Mysterio is dead, and he didn't put the gun to Mysterio's head or anything like that, but that fight, he couldn't save Mysterio, and I think that just sort of goes back to his character and why he makes the decisions he does in No Way Home. It's like, no, we gotta save all these guys, so I don't know, it works. I agree with you. That's excellent movie. Although I think it was my number 7, so I was like, but I agree with you that the fight scene was great. So my number 3 is No Way Home. What we've just talked about. I'm not going to go into depth with it. I thought it was fantastic. I love seeing everybody back. Just a totally joyous experience at the movie theaters for me. One of the few that I can say I've ever had in my life where I'm just sitting there and I'm like, wow. I saw Infinity War at the Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, and I saw Endgame at the El Capitan on Hollywood Boulevard. These amazing classic movie theaters, and with an audience that was just into it. And there's nothing quite like seeing an audience filled with people who are just absolutely enthralled by what they're watching and reacting and interacting and stuff with it. It's just a great time. So that's my number 3. Steve, your number 2.
Spider-Man 2. For a long time, it was not only my favorite Spider-Man movie, but my favorite superhero movie, period. It is a superhero movie that I feel gets everything right. I love the love story between Peter and Mary Jane. I love that Peter Parker tries to walk away, but he understands that it's his responsibility. He has to be Spider-Man, essentially. And Doc Ock has always been one of my favorite villains, and I think Alfred Molina killed it.
Perfect casting. Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect casting. Okay. Ronan, you're number 2.
It's a Spider-Man 2. It's
Okay.
basically mirroring everything Steve said. For a while there, it's like this an X2 for the longest time until some of the Marvel movies started to catch up. It's like Spider-Man 2 and X2 were definitely probably amongst like the best comic book movies that have been made up to that point. And it definitely was the best Spider-Man movie up until about like 5-ish years ago or so. So
I never really liked any of the X-Men movies, honestly. And I was a big X-Men fan, but I always thought the X-Men movies were just kind of not... I don't know, I always felt that they got it wrong. The filmmakers just always got it wrong. But we're not talking about X-Men. Spider-Man 2, I mean, yeah, that's...
And again, Alfred Molina, the perfect like that. That's what Raimi did right in the first 2 movies. Like specifically, was he perfectly cast the villain. It's we can like a McGuire, like Steve said, but the villains he pitch perfect casting, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So my number 2 is what you guys have, is Spider-Man 2. So we're in unison on our number 2 favorite Spider-Man. Now, the Spider-Man 2, when I rewatched it, Spider-Man 2 was my favorite Spider-Man film of all time. It always has been, and when I did my rewatch, I was like, surely this is going to be still my number 1, even after No Way Home and whatnot. It turned out not to be. And it's... The main reason why it sort of changes, upon a rewatch, I felt that it's like your mind thinks there's more Doc Ock in the movie than there actually is.
No, he disappears. He's only in like 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, he disappears for the entire second act of the movie. And
there is one scene of him in that dock just kind of building away. And otherwise, he's gone.
He's gone. And when I rewatched it, I'm like, man, I wish there had been more Dr. Octopus in this. I really wish. But then again, I mean, this is splitting hairs at this point. This is a great movie. It's still up there with one of the best superhero movies ever made, in my opinion. And I just want to give props to Kirsten Dunst. She is awesome in all 3 of these movies. I think she's like the great undervalued character in these Raimi films, because she kind of is the glue that holds all of it together in a lot of ways. And she's fantastic in this. Like you said, Doc Ock is great. And the story is just, I mean, it's like perfect. That train sequence, right? When he's fighting Doc Ock on that train, not only is that an amazing action sequence, but the great thing about it is the end. People don't talk about the end of that scene. They talk about, okay, Spider-Man, he's able to stop the train, but he's basically like gonna fall to his death head first into the ocean.
All the passengers saved.
Everybody saves
Why didn't
him.
all of those passengers get pulled into the MCU?
They probably did, Steve. We just didn't see him.
Well, no, they knew his face. They didn't know he was Peter Parker. That could be a loophole there.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But I love that sequence when, again, to your point, Ronan, about taking off the mask, right? I know they give a little bit of a reason why, because he gets burned on the side of his face and he has to rip his mask off before he stops the thing. But I love the fact, and maybe this is just because I am an idealist at heart, even though I'm a realist in mind. I have, in my ideal version of life, those people on that train would be good people, and they'd be like, you know what, I'm not going to sell this kid's identity out to TMZ, even though in reality they would in a heartbeat. But just that sort of moment when all of these New Yorkers basically save him. And Raimi kind of did that at the end of the first one as well, when the New Yorkers are trying to protect him from the Green Goblin. There's that scene where the guy's like, if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. Yeah. I like that Raimi put that in the movie, that not everybody in the world is just a total asshole. And even when when a superhero does something really great for people, like a person saves their life, that they would be like, they would repay that in a way by like, I'm not going to reveal your secret identity for $1 million to J. Jonah Jameson or something like that. I know I know it wouldn't happen in real life, but I like that it happens in the movies, and that's just to me, it's a very powerful moment. And it also shows the thing where Raimi also shows where the kids look up to Spider-Man, right? And that kind of stuff. So, Spider-Man 2, it's a great movie. Strangely enough, it dropped on my all-time list. But we'll go to you, Steve, for your number one most favorite Spider-Man film.
I mean, it's going to be No Way Home. I'm fully willing to admit this is possibly a recency bias, since we've all seen the movie within the last week and a half. You probably won't hear this for 6 months, but it was great, and I enjoyed that the two previous Spider-Mans got some sort of closure, and just Willem Dafoe was just amazing in No Way Home. So basically, like, how good the villain is determines the ranking in my movies.
And you know what's great about Willem Dafoe in this is, I do not mind his Power Rangers outfit in Spider-Man 1. I know a lot of people really hate that. And, of course, at the time, I was like, man, I wish they could have do the comic-accurate Green Goblin. But then I'm like, how would they do the face? Like, it always just sort of in my head, I'm like, how would you make that Goblin look?
There was a version of it where it did have the face. I remember there was like test footage of it on the internet. I forget the special effects place that made it, but it was supposed to be like the more comic face. I've seen footage of it.
I haven't seen the footage of it, but to me in my head it was always like, I don't know how this is actually going to work. But I have no problem with Willem Dafoe stuff. But the great thing in that original is like, man, Willem Dafoe has such a great face, right? He has when he's talking to himself in the mirror and going, he's not only is a great actor, but just that, I mean, those are the moments of the Green Goblin that people remember. And I'm so happy that in No Way Home, he basically smashes that Goblin mask and we get to see him emote and be evil. Like that sequence in No Way Home when Tom Holland just punching the shit out of him and he's just laughing. He's just laughing in his face like it's nothing. To me, like the Green Goblin is to Spider-Man what the Joker is to Batman. And Willem Dafoe played this version of Green Goblin in No Way Home as the Joker, because you could imagine the Joker just sitting there laughing his ass off when Batman's punching him, right? So I feel like
we've seen that happen in a movie before.
Yeah, so I feel like they really nailed, like, hey, Peter needs his Joker, and this is as close to a Joker as we're going to get in the MCU, and I just loved how he played that. But yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that. So No Way Home for you is your number one, Steve. Good choice. Ronan, your number one?
It's we've listed it all down, so by this point it's clearly obvious what it is. It's No Way Home. We've gushed over it for too long. We'll kind of put over just one little quick add-on to it is the bad thing about bringing in William Dafoe or Alfred Molina is that it does mean that now you're not going to get an MCU version, or probably not going to get an MCU version of these characters. But at the same token, I've mentioned this to Steve, it's like they were pitch perfect cast beforehand. Anything else is a downgrade at this point. So if you if Norman Osborn randomly appears in MCU as suddenly build up this powerful corporation, it's never going to be as good.
Well, they mention in No Way Home that there is no Oscorp in the MCU because Willem Dafoe actually mentions it when he's at Feast. And where's Mr. Negative? Mr. Negative is going to show up. I mean, they've introduced Feast now into the MCU, but Willem Dafoe, he's like, there's no Oscorp. So I think that, I think you're right. I don't think they're going to go the Green Goblin route at all in any of the
but
sequels.
Mind you, we've seen it. We've seen it in the Raimi versions. The Amazing Spider-Man movies tried to do it too. Yeah, it's at this point, I don't need to see it again. I'm okay with it. But that also means that that avenue for storytelling with those characters is gone.
Yep.
So that is kind of a negative. But it was done right the first time. You can't recast that.
Yeah. Jeff points out here in the chat, Willem Dafoe's outfit in No Way Home is on fleek. And I agree. I love that they put the purple, like they tried to make it look at least as close to the comic accurate outfit as it did.
They added a little something to it.
Yeah. And he's so good. And he's so evil. Like, just look at what he did to Aunt May. Shit. Not only that, threw a freaking bomb at her and blew her sky high. It was great. It was fantastic. So that's your number one. So my number one favorite Spider-Man film of all of them is the original Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi. And the reason why is because after a rewatch, I watched this Spider-Man movie and I was like, there is nothing I would change about this. To me, this is like perfect. Now, obviously earlier I said, I was like, man, I wish that, Peter Parker would have had like the web shooters, and there's a couple other things that I was like, man, if they could have done it well, I wish that Green Goblin would have looked like his classic Green Goblin stuff. But in terms of just like, this is a movie version of what you've sort of grown up with Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I thought it was just perfect. I thought it was a perfect introduction. It was like, when I saw it at the time, it was everything that I could have wanted, from the first time I've seen Spider-Man, like on the big screen before. And so rewatching it again, it was just, an absolute joy. It's still one of those things where it's like, I love the origin story of Willem Dafoe. I love that, he's kind of a good guy, and then basically he's like, I'm going to lose everything. I've got to take this serum, and it turns him, whack. But it's just his interactions. It's great. And not a small part of this is Sam Raimi. I grew up watching Sam Raimi with the Evil Dead movies, right? Like Sam Raimi, when I was in high school and I'm like, 14, 15 years old, I'm renting Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and sort of growing up with Sam Raimi as sort of an icon for me, right? Because, I love to be a director, right? I've directed a couple movies. It's a big thrill to me to be able to do that. And some of my directorial icons, one of them was Sam Raimi. A lot of influence from that. So it was so cool also to be able to see Sam Raimi, this person I've followed since I was a kid, basically, and loved his movies, get a chance to do something big like this and then do it so well and show so much love for the character and so much respect for the characters. Still my favorite. Again, I love No Way Home. I love all of these, like in the top 7 or whatever. I would watch all of them multiple times. But it's the original Spider-Man. Joyous occasion to watch that, and rewatching it again, I still highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it in years, because it came out like 2002 or something like that.
Yeah,
if you haven't seen it in 20 years, rewatch it. If you have kids, put it on for your kids. Say, hey, this is Spider-Man in my day. I guarantee you they'll get a kick out of it. And fantastic all around. So, and we haven't really touched on the Harry Osborn arc with James Franco. I love that whole thing. No, see, I loved it, though. I loved it through 1, 2, and 3. Now, I agree, Steve, the butler just suddenly saying, oh, that's dumb. But if they would have done that exact same thing where he turned good but used an actual plausible explanation for it that we could buy into, I would have loved it. That was a perfect arc for that character over the course of 3 films. Going from friend, going to finding out, then going to sort of evil turn, and then being like, you know what, you're still my friend, dude, and saving Peter's life. Would have been a great arc if Spider-Man 3 just would have tweaked the reason for the turn a little bit better. But love that movie. What is Jeff saying here? In order for No Way Home to work as well as it does, the different versions need to actually have differences between them. Example, the web shooters. Yes, that's a great point, because that's a great moment in No Way Home when they're like, that comes out of you? That's the only? Is that the? Does it come out anywhere? And he's like, no, just my wrists. And I totally agree with you, Jeff. That is a great point, that the differences between all of them really made a lot of those stuff. Because if they were the exact same in each one, No Way Home would be like, okay, it's just the exact same Peter Parker. That would not have worked as well. So totally agree with you. Good point on that. But So yeah, that's our list of the top Spider-Man movies. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys want to talk about with Spider-Man? It's been 2 hours and 13 minutes of Spider-Man talk.
Oh God! Please tell me this is getting edited down.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like this was all solid, honestly. At least most of it. I might
Really?
edit out some of Ronan's comments about the cartoon Gwen, Spider-Gwen.
Hey, fuck you. What's
But
my asshole?
no. But overall, I think Spider-Man is still to me the greatest comic book character. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who disagree with me, but I just think over the course of the Spider-Man, I don't know, what would you call it? Like, not canon and comic bookography, whatever it is, all the stories that Spider-Man has had over time, I think, and just the way he was sort of formed and created, and the tragedy and all that. I think he's one of the most relatable comic book characters, and has some of the greatest stories. I will say that they are making a Craven movie. With who is that guy? An actor I cannot stand. I can't remember that. It's a Sony verse, so I'm just like, I hope Andrew Garfield does all that stuff, and they just leave Tom Holland doing his thing over in the MCU. But if any of you have not read Fearful Symmetry, they've retitled it Kraven's Last Hunt in trade paperback form, I think. That is a freaking amazing Spider-Man story. It came out in the 80s. People always think, all the Spider-Man stories are all these sort of, he's just quipping and doing all this, fun, goofy stuff. Not the case. Spoiler, at the end of Fearful Symmetry, Kraven the Hunter blows his head off with a shotgun. So, and it's just an incredible story of Kraven the Hunter, who basically, he takes over the role as Spider-Man. And to prove that he is the superior version of Spider-Man, and then everything that happens throughout the course of that, I would highly recommend checking out that storyline. Get the trade paperback, ask your local library to order it so you can read it for free if you need to. But fantastic story. Probably, maybe one of my top 3 of favorite Spider-Man storylines of all time. Fearful Symmetry or Kraven's Last Hunt, depending on what they're calling it now. So, with that, I know we still have Boba Fett to talk about, so we're going to cut off this podcast, though. Ronan, I'm just going to throw it to you to see what happens. Why don't you take us out of the Spider-Man podcast?
Thanks for listening. Bye.